The sky was collapsing in a violent storm as a man ran alone, soaked to the bone. The cry of a passerby calling out for his grandfather made him freeze in the middle of the street. The impact was immediate. That call awakened an agony he had been trying to bury. Everything came back like a punch. At 14, his life had been shattered on twisted asphalt. A car accident took his parents and left him with nothing. The rest of the family showed their true colors. No one wanted the burden of raising an orphan. In the middle of that abandonment, while he struggled to understand his own future, a firm hand touched his head. It was his grandfather. With a warm, gentle smile, the old man promised he would be there. In that room, his grandfather's embrace was the only shield against despair. Time passed, but the struggle continued. Now the setting was a cold hospital. His grandfather lay in a bed, unconscious after suffering a stroke. The protagonist stared at the glass door with his nerves on edge, fearing the worst. That was when the rest of the family showed up to deliver the final blow. Without a single ounce of empathy, his uncle and aunt were blunt. His time with them was over. They would no longer support him. The young man simply listened, kept his composure, and accepted his fate. He knew he did not belong in that place, but the outside world showed no mercy. The moment he stepped onto the sidewalk, danger found him. A stranger rushed forward and grabbed him by the clothes, cornering him. The tone was aggressive, leaving no room for negotiation. The thug demanded immediate payment of an old debt, something his parents had left behind. The truce was over. The tension in the street grew heavy. Chen tried to argue, his voice shaking, insisting that the 100,000 had already been paid, but the attacker had no interest in logic. He snarled about accumulated interest, and before the young man could react, a brutal punch sent him flying. The warning was short and cold. The debt was now 350,000, and he had only 3 days to get the money. Desperate, he ran through the storm until he reached a house. A girl opened the door and quickly let him inside. In the bedroom, the atmosphere was hostile. His uncle and aunt stood beside the bed with unfriendly expressions, complaining about his return. A young man who was there simply watched him with contempt, focused on what he could gain from the situation. The shock came when he looked at the bed. His grandfather was covered with a white sheet. Without a trace of remorse, the man stood up and delivered the final blow, saying the old man had died because of him. Chen was left alone, swallowed by a crushing silence beside the body. That was when the impossible happened. He felt a gentle touch, a hand that no longer seemed to belong to this world. His grandfather's soul appeared right there, sitting beside his grandson. With a loving gesture on the young man's head, the old man called his name and brought a sudden sense of peace, making it clear that he knew the whole truth and that Chen was not alone. The old man's spirit spoke directly. He told him to ignore the poison of his relatives, because nothing in this world happens without leaving a trace. He advised his grandson to keep decency in his heart, assuring him that only then would he find true wealth. In a gesture of absolute gratitude, Chen fell to his knees before the bed, before stepping back into his brutal reality. Night fell, and the scene shifted to the noise and flashing lights of a nightclub. Now working as a waiter, Chen balanced trays and served wine in heavy, suffocating environments. As he entered one of the VIP rooms, he ran into a client named Banya, who was surrounded by people and had no interest in conversation, ordering the young man to leave immediately. As he walked away, Chen heard the commotion of a man arriving with news for Banya. The man bragged about capturing a female student and keeping her locked inside a fitting room as if she were a trophy. Disgust rose in Chen's throat. He realized those rich men were the same kind of scum as the debt collectors who had vandalized his house with paint. The pressure was suffocating. Chen remembered the insane promise he had made to the thug, to pay 350,000 in just 2 months. He felt like a fool for accepting such an impossible deadline. Lost in his thoughts, he felt a sudden tap on his shoulder. It was Sands, the manager, demanding speed and asking whether the orders had been delivered. Chen confirmed everything, but the frustration and the weight of the world made it hard for him to breathe. Reality hit his wallet hard. Only 200 wen in tips, a joke for someone who owed a fortune. Manager Sang, with the smile of someone who knew all the dirty shortcuts, mocked the situation, saying great fortunes start with crumbs. He suggested that Chen should use his charm with customers to make more money, but the young man felt his stomach turn. Even with the insistence that it was for his own good, Chen's disgust toward the advice was obvious. He grabbed the tray and went back to work, trying to ignore the filth of the place. The tension exploded when a loud crash echoed through the hallway. A door was kicked open violently, revealing the arrogance of the VIP clients. They were the same despicable types as before. Banya was impatient, but his partner insisted that the captured girl was exactly what he had been looking for. From a distance, Chen watched the scene with hatred, labeling those men as the bastards they truly were. In the middle of the chaos, the unexpected happened. A girl in a red dress appeared and walked straight toward the protagonist. She hugged him, acting as if they were close and slightly drunk from alcohol. Calling him by name, she created the perfect distraction and gave the order that would change everything. In a conspiratorial tone, she asked him to retrieve her purse that had been left in the fitting room, the exact place where the other young woman was being held captive. Whether he wanted to or not, Chen was being pushed straight into the center of danger. Xiaoli put on a show of arrogance, accusing Chen of hitting on her just to impress her friends. The group burst into laughter, mocking the waiter's shyness, while he hurried down the hallway, boiling with anger at being treated like a doormat. He swore to himself that this humiliation would not go unanswered. In the rush to get the purse, Chen accidentally bumped into a client. The man exploded, shouting at him to watch where he was going. As he stammered an apology, Chen's eyes caught a terrifying scene through a half-open door. Inside, a girl was tied up, her eyes overflowing with panic and tears. The shock was interrupted by the attacker's shouts, demanding that he get out immediately. Van and his partner entered the room, locking the door to make sure no one interrupted their fun. Inside, the young woman struggled against the ropes and the gag in a desperate attempt to be saved, while the two scumbags celebrated the beauty of their captive and prepared for the worst. Chen stood frozen in front of the closed door, carrying the weight of a decision that could change his life. Van lunged at the girl with a sick smile, promising a kindness that only filled her with terror. She begged him to stop, desperately trying to use her father's name as a shield, but the attacker only roared that no one was coming to save her. The sharp crack of a cowardly slap echoed through the locker room, signaling that the nightmare was about to begin. Outside, Van's accomplice blocked the entrance, taking a drag from his cigarette with complete indifference to her suffering. He stared at Chen with contempt, ordering the waiter not to dare step through that door. The atmosphere was pure hostility. Chen felt his stomach twist. He compared that human trash to the debt collectors who had vandalized his house, but realized what was happening inside was an even more vile crime. In the middle of the storm of fear and hesitation, his grandfather's voice echoed in his mind. Keep kindness in your heart. That was the wake-up call he needed. He understood that if he did nothing, that young woman's future would be destroyed forever. With a transformed, determined gaze, the waiter moved toward the locker room. The man with the cigarette stepped into his path, blowing smoke with disdain and asking in a threatening tone where the kid thought he was going. The front line had been drawn. Chen was firm. He would not let that man ruin the girl's destiny. In a sudden move, he grabbed the attacker's wrist with brutal strength. With a twist of his body, he hurled the opponent aside, clearing the path. Without hesitation, Chen smashed the locker room door open with a devastating punch, revealing a bathtub inside. He spotted a fire extinguisher and grabbed it. The echo of his grandfather's advice rang through his mind for a moment, bringing clarity. Without mercy, he discharged the extinguisher straight toward the attacker's head, striking him from behind. The young woman, shocked and unable to understand the chaos, trembled under Chen's stern and intimidating gaze. The tension thickened. She shouted for him to run, trying to bolt out of the room. On the floor, the injured man tried to grab her leg to stop her escape, but she managed to break free into the hallway. As she ran desperately among the other customers, the attacker regained his senses, screaming for someone to stop her. The girl looked back one last time, promising to get help before disappearing into the chaos of the establishment, where Van's name was already spreading as someone who had just left. The situation escalated to a deadly level. The enemy reached into his pocket, possessed with rage, shouting that Chen had dug his own grave. A shining knife flashed into view. In the middle of the standoff, an unknown figure appeared behind him. Chen felt the impact before he saw the strike. Van drove the blade deep into the protagonist's back. The hit was brutal. Van staggered backward, letting out a hysterical scream of terror. An accomplice shouted beside him, horrified at the realization that the waiter had been sentenced right there on the spot. The wound was fatal. Chen's world collapsed as he fell onto the cold floor. Silence came quickly, and he barely had time to process how everything had ended so suddenly and permanently. Chen's body lay stretched out, surrounded by a pool of blood spreading across the ground. Van, trembling and consumed by panic, crouched down to stare at the victim. Beside him, the accomplice screamed desperately, trying to distance himself from any blame for the crime. Van ignored him. His fury turned toward the hallway, shouting orders for his subordinate not to let the girl escape under any circumstances. As Chen's consciousness faded, his grandfather's words echoed one last time. Destiny reserves treasures for those who are good. Convinced that the end had come and that a reunion with his father was near, the unexpected happened. Chen jolted awake in shock. The environment around him was no longer the bloody restaurant. He forced his body to rise, feeling as if he had crossed the boundary of reality itself. Before his eyes, the scene was impossible. Dozens of floating windows displayed system errors, as if the universe itself were glitching. The brightness was unbearable. Swirls of white light blinded everything, forcing Chen to cover his face with his hands. At the center of that radiance, a female silhouette began to take shape. What had once been only a figure in white robes gained definition and life. The stranger's clothes shifted into vibrant neon tones, while her hair turned a deep, intense blue. Frozen in place, Chen could only watch the mysterious figure emerging in that new digital world. Confused and unable to understand where he was, Chen analyzed the new environment when he suddenly came face to face with a stranger. The reception was not friendly. The girl looked at him with total disdain. She turned toward an invisible presence and mockingly questioned whether that man was truly the chosen one and who would have signed a contract with someone like him. Chen's patience evaporated. He could not stand the arrogant tone of that stranger. Annoyed, the other being present, who identified himself as Ray, an immortal spirit, asked whether Chen was mute. Inside, the girl was boiling. She forced a posture of superiority to avoid stuttering from nervousness and being hated by him. The tension rose when Chen, outraged, confronted the girl for calling him stupid. The tension climbed even higher. Chen, still processing his own death, questioned whether that girl was some kind of reward from the afterlife. The answer came violently. The system hurled a gigantic sword in his direction. It was a weapon from the immortal world, a divine-level treasure shining before his eyes. Still trembling but burning with anger, Chen stood up and shouted at the system, demanding to be heard. The girl simply watched him with disgust, unable to understand the reason for such a scene. Trying to maintain control of the situation, she explained to her spiritual companion that the newcomer was still in shock. As Chen watched her in disbelief, the young woman began searching through the void, materializing and pulling various objects out of thin air. Gold appeared out of nowhere. The girl casually dumped a fortune in heavy relics at Chen's feet, leaving him hypnotized by the shine. The system confirmed it all belonged to him. In the middle of that mountain of treasure, she extended a special mirror. The message was short. That object was the passport to travel between the immortal world and ordinary reality. But no one would hand him the secret path. He would have to learn the rules on his own. Still in shock and overflowing with excitement, the young man tried to apologize for his excessive enthusiasm. Before he could finish speaking, the environment shifted. Lightning tore through the air and wrapped the girl in a destructive electric aura. In a quick reflex, Qin transformed into a stream of luminous energy and hid beneath Shen's clothing. Alone with that wealth, the protagonist faced a logistical dilemma. How could he carry so much gold? That was when the system saved him. A notification appeared, guaranteeing that he had just unlocked a dimensional inventory. Now he could store and retrieve any item with a single thought. Satisfied with the new ability, Shen watched the gold vanish into empty space while the system celebrated the success of the first storage operation. Far away from there, the atmosphere was cold and merciless. Inside a luxurious chamber, a woman dressed in ancient robes stared at her own reflection in a massive mirror. Servants moved in absolute silence in the background. One of them approached with a tray of food, addressing her by the title of Saint. Without taking her eyes off the glass, the authority dismissed the meal. Her appetite was not for food, and the tension in the room made it clear that something far greater was at stake. The servant insisted, worried. Her mistress had gone an entire year without touching food, something impossible for any normal human being. With a look of disdain, the saint ignored the tray, but her boredom vanished the instant she noticed the mirror. The glass was cracked. In an instinctive leap, she stepped away from the table in shock. The long-awaited moment had finally arrived. While the maid kept rambling about the item being a gift from some immortal, the saint remembered her master's prophecy. The shattering of that mirror would signal the arrival of the one who commands destiny. The sense of despair inside Yunui Palace evaporated, replaced by a spark of hope she had not felt in a very long time. On the other side, the protagonist stared at a sword lying at his feet. He had never been in a fight in his life, and could not understand why the system had not automatically pulled the weapon into his inventory. His concern was purely practical. He was already imagining a police officer stopping him at a subway gate for carrying something like that. As he reached out to deal with the problem, the system triggered an alert. He had just inherited the immortal sword technique. Before he could even celebrate how easy the upgrade was, a metallic sound shattered the silence. He spun around in alarm, but he was not fast enough. The magic sword came to life on its own and lunged at him in a direct attack. The weapon in his hands began to vibrate and emit a strange hum, pulling Chen's body with a bizarre force. Before he could understand what was happening, the sky was swallowed by a gigantic fire phoenix. The creature dove straight down, unleashing blasts of flames toward the ground. Frozen in place, the protagonist barely had time to raise the sword in a desperate defensive motion as the bird opened its beak to incinerate him. The impact came, but the shock was even greater. He blocked the attack. In the middle of the chaos, the system flashed before his eyes, and the girl's voice echoed, ordering him to use the appraisal skill. The display lit up, revealing the opponent's status. It was a B fan, ranked 177th on the leaderboard. Fear hit hard, and Chen shouted when he saw the level of the monster charging at him. Beside him, Sin appeared flying and quickly lost her patience, yelling at him to attack immediately and take the creature down. He still doubted that a blade could cut through living fire, but she insisted. With the immortal sword art, he was untouchable. That was when it clicked. Chen remembered that the worst had already happened. He had already died once. Fear gave way to aggressive determination. He planted his feet firmly, raised the sword with both hands above his head, and channeled all his strength. With a battle cry, he accepted the system's challenge and went all in against the predator. The phoenix's trail shot past Chen like lightning, and the impact was immediate. The system triggered level-up notifications as he collapsed. On the ground, a shower of magical items and the coveted shadow crystal appeared as rewards. He tried to meditate to process the chaos, but exhaustion took over. The world spun, his vision darkened, and he passed out. When he opened his eyes, the ceiling was familiar. Chen jumped up, recognizing his own room in the rented apartment. The silence and the ordinary surroundings suggested everything had been a hallucination, but the doubt vanished the moment he felt the mattress. There, solid and real, was the magic mirror. It wasn't a dream, a female voice said. Sitting right there, casually touching up her makeup as if nothing were unusual, was the woman from the palace. Chen nearly fell out of bed in shock, demanding to know who the intruder was. She responded only with a look of deep contempt, while the system confirmed the activation mission was complete and the rewards were being released. The phone on the nightstand vibrated, interrupting the tense moment. Chen grabbed the device, and his jaw dropped. A banking notification confirmed a deposit of 1 million yuan. Beside him, the visitor watched his reaction with disdain, warning that the easy part was over. Now he would have to train hard to handle what was coming next. The woman delivered her ultimatum. He needed to train twice as hard to be useful in the future. With a sharp shout of encouragement, she simply vanished into thin air, leaving Chen alone with the phone in his hand. He stared at the screen, realizing that bank balance was his ticket to freedom from debt. The moment of peace did not last long. Someone started pounding on the front door with fury. The intruder shouted that he would tear the place apart if necessary before kicking the door open. Chen remained standing in the center of the room, staring at the debt collectors with cold contempt. The thugs froze. They were in shock because the rumor on the streets was that Chen had been executed by Wang Yu, with witnesses and everything. As soon as the leader regained his composure, he demanded immediate payment. Without raising his voice, the protagonist simply asked for the total. Chen's confidence unsettled the group. No one could understand how that man, who was supposed to be dead and broke, could possibly pay a single cent. He announced the exact amount, 350,000. The collector, still convinced it was a bluff, held out his phone for the transfer. Chen completed the transaction with a furious look, paying everything in one shot. The man could barely believe the payment confirmation on his screen. While the thug celebrated the unexpected luck, a lingering suspicion remained. He could not shake the feeling that the kid had a hidden card up his sleeve that he had not yet discovered. The gang leader tried one last threat, growling that any tricks would come at a heavy cost, but Chen simply shrugged. The money was already in the account, and the matter was finished. Furious and confused about how the boy had managed to pay even the interest on old loans, the collector tried to step forward, but Chen jumped back with a warning shout, preventing any contact. Not understanding anything but satisfied with their pockets full, the henchman backed off and left. Alone and finally at peace, the protagonist stared at the magic mirror. He tested his luck out loud, wishing to travel to the world of immortals. The object reacted instantly, firing beams of light that blinded him. When his vision returned, the apartment living room had vanished. In its place, the colossal gates of a purple palace rose before him. The system quickly activated, mapping his status and granting access to the digital marketplace. Chen took a quick look at his inventory and balance. The remaining 650,000 yuan appeared there, proving that his fortune existed in both worlds. The problem was the prices. Everything in the shop was absurdly expensive, which meant he would need strategy to survive outside those walls. Suddenly, his appearance was rewritten. The ordinary outfit gave way to the majestic robes of an immortal master, and a heavy sword appeared in his hands. Feeling power rushing through his veins, Chen couldn't hold back his excitement. He dashed through the palace gardens at high speed, sensing that the game had finally begun. Without hesitation, he crossed the main gates, ready for whatever came next. Sword in hand, the protagonist rushed onto the road, shouting that his time had arrived. The journey began on the shore of a lake, where he prepared his final meal before diving headfirst into the territory of the Immortals. The trial by fire came on the very first day, a brutal clash against giant porcupines that left his robes in tatters. On the second day, he managed to steal the fruit of immortality, which triggered a frantic chase by beastly guardians that only ended at midnight. The third day was pure bad luck, or maybe good luck. He plunged into a river and, while nearly drowning, the water he swallowed awakened his spiritual veins. On the fourth day, the challenge was the Shadow Gecko. The battle became a turning point that unlocked brand new abilities in his arsenal. On the fifth day, he took refuge in a cave, deciphering the laws of that world through ancient paintings on the walls. By the sixth day, he had already mastered survival, patching up his own armor and robe. At the end of that chaotic week, Chen allowed himself a brief moment of rest. Lying on the ground, he enjoyed a piece of fruit while processing everything he had learned. The peace lasted only seconds. A strange noise made him jump to his feet. Someone, or something, was approaching. Chen activated his introspection ability, sharpening his senses to scan the darkness. What he saw froze his blood. Winged shadow wolves, level 200 monsters with scarlet eyes glowing like embers. One of them, with an almost human shape and a hungry gaze, stared directly at him. Panic hit instantly. Looking at that massive pack, he realized that fighting would be suicide. In a gesture of pure desperation, he clasped his hands together, hoping to become invisible. Like a miracle, the horde of predators rushed past him like a black storm, ignoring his presence as they sped forward. The wolves ignored Chen, passing by him like a blur. Relieved, he realized the beasts had a far more interesting target. In the center of a clearing, a young warrior wielding a heavy sword was cornered. In the background, two servants trembled in fear. One of them begged her mistress to run and save herself, since she had the skill to escape alone, but the saint didn't even consider the idea. Even surrounded by red eyes and growls, the leader refused to retreat. She studied the pack with restrained fury, making it clear she wouldn't abandon anyone. In an explosive move, she ignored the pleas for safety and launched into the offensive. Leaping between the beasts, the warrior began striking with technical aggression, prioritizing the protection of her subordinates over her own life. The fight escalated quickly. With a powerful spin, she drove the blade into one of the wolves' arms, spilling blood onto the forest floor. The hatred in her voice was obvious as she ordered the creatures to die already. In a burst of speed, she broke through one predator's defense, taking it down with a precise slash. The beast's howl of agony echoed through the woods, signaling that the hunt had turned into a bloody battlefield. The warrior never stopped moving, focused on a single goal: buying time. She knew that only the Great Elder had the power to wipe out that pack, so she had to hold on at any cost. With a heavy strike, she tried to split one of the wolves in half, but the beast blocked the blow with its claws, producing a metallic crack in the air. The sacrifice was for the Yunui Palace, and she spun her blade frantically to repel attacks coming from every direction, keeping the servants protected behind her. The battle became personal when one of the monsters launched a precise swipe toward the young woman's face. She dodged by a hair, and in a swift counterattack, severed the creature's paw. The wolf began dissolving into shadows, but there was no time to celebrate. The scream of one of the maids cut through the noise of the fight, warning that the danger was now coming from below. Before she could react, the ground gave way. A colossal demonic hand burst from the earth and wrapped around the saint's body, lifting her into the air as if she were a toy. The claws of the winged demon squeezed her with crushing force, paralyzing her movements and draining her strength. Helpless and gasping for air, she watched the servants fall into despair as another wolf approached, raising its paw to deliver the finishing blow. The servant collapsed to the ground, paralyzed, as the beast's claws passed just inches from her head. The monster roared, dominating the clearing with the two girls helpless at its feet. It tightened its grip on the warrior with brutal strength, crushing any attempt to resist. Feeling her life slipping away, the saint closed her eyes and accepted the end. The fatal strike never came. Out of nowhere, a heavy blade sliced through the air, followed by a massive spear that struck the monster directly, forcing it to release its captive. Stunned, the girl looked up, trying to understand who possessed such power to intervene. In the sky, floating with an aura of authority and a battle bow in hand, stood Chen. The protagonist looked at the scene with a mix of boredom and duty. He knew risking his life there might be a thankless effort, but he didn't hesitate. Wielding the sword of the immortal world, he dove from the heights like a meteor, crashing straight into the horde of predators. The saint watched everything in shock. Judging by his robes, he looked like someone from the upper ranks of Yunui Palace, but she had never seen that face before. While she tried to process the identity of her savior, Chen was already in the middle of the massacre, slicing through the wolves with terrifying precision. The system kept ringing non-stop. Level up confirmed and a new skill, the Shadow Wolf Tail, unlocked. To anyone watching from afar, Chen's lethal efficiency turned the battlefield into a spectacle of absolute power. The scene felt strangely familiar, but there was no time for nostalgia. A colossal predator burst from the ground, leaping onto Chen's back for a fatal strike. The protagonist saw the reflection of fear in the girl's eyes and realized the trap had finally closed. Before the claws could tear him in half, the saint threw herself in front of him. She used her own body as a shield, taking the full impact of the beast's strike. The blow sent her flying backward, but Chen was faster. He caught her in midair and, in a swift retreat, carried her to the safety of a nearby tree trunk. With a commanding shout, he ordered her to stay there. The wolf's audacity in attacking from behind ignited the young man's fury. He twisted his body in disgust at such cowardly tactics and leaped from the tree, facing an entire pack rushing toward him. The monster's speed was absurd, but Chen already had the answer. With a mental command, he summoned his trump card, the 7-star Lunar Spear. Holding the magical artifact, he spun it in a whirlwind of energy before preparing the final throw. He roared at the predators, making it clear that no matter how strong they were, he despised those who preyed on the weak. The spear cut through the air like a comet. The impact was devastating. A deafening explosion swallowed the wolves, while the system notified an immediate increase in all his attributes. In the trail of smoke, figures appeared among the trees. Elite reinforcements had just arrived in the forest. Reinforcements finally emerged from between the trees, running toward the saint. Old Lao led the group, visibly tense and shouting orders at the top of his lungs. He was furious that the young Lan Lao had risked herself in dangerous territory without proper escort, and he demanded that everyone pick up the pace for the rescue. Meanwhile, in the clearing, Chen was finishing the job. The last shadow wolf fell dead at his feet. The protagonist celebrated the victory as reward notifications appeared. He had obtained the beast's rare hide and the legendary fen wings. Among the items, a mysterious winged pearl shone brightly, marked by the system as non-transferable. With no time to figure out its purpose, he stored it away to deal with later. The silence of the clearing was broken by the sound of rapid movement approaching. Near a tree trunk, the saint remained unconscious. Chen activated his introspection vision and confirmed the advance of Old Lao and his elite warriors. Realizing the army was coming to rescue the girls, he chose not to offer any explanations. In a swift motion, the protagonist slipped into the shadows and vanished into the forest before the group could detect him. With no intention of leaving traces or explaining his presence, Chen acted quickly. With a sharp movement, he activated his combat camouflage and disappeared into thin air, becoming a ghost to anyone who arrived. Seconds later, Old Lao and his troops stormed the area at high speed. The veteran rushed toward the tree where the saint lay motionless. Overcome with panic, he caught her in his arms, desperately trying to bring her back to consciousness. When she finally opened her eyes, fear gave way to duty. The young woman assured him she was fine, but warned that Jiang and Zhao Er were in critical condition and needed immediate help. Hidden behind a tree trunk, Chen watched the scene unfold. Satisfied to see that the official rescue had taken control, he relaxed. There was no longer any reason to stay. He pulled out the magic mirror and, with a silent command, stepped through the portal back to his reality, disappearing from the world of immortals in the blink of an eye. In the forest, the rescue group remained behind, processing the trail of destruction left by the invisible savior. Lan and Zhao exchanged confused glances, sensing that something extraordinary had just happened, while the saint remained lost in thought, staring at the sky as if searching for the answer to who the mysterious warrior was. Back in his apartment, the atmosphere was completely different. Chen stepped out of the shower, drying his hair with a towel and feeling the weight of the week of battles finally leave his body. Standing before the ordinary bathroom mirror, he looked at his own reflection, savoring the silence of home after surviving the chaos of another dimension. Facing the mirror, Chen could hardly believe what he saw. The frail body had been replaced by defined muscles and a sculpted abdomen. The transformation was complete. He examined himself from head to toe, trying to understand why the world of immortals had chosen him, concluding, with a touch of humility, that his very essence must have caught the attention of the heavens. A knock on the door interrupted his admiration. It was Tian Tian, the delivery girl, who froze when she saw Chen wearing nothing but a towel. She looked as if she had just seen a celebrity, shocked by the drastic change in the young man's appearance. To downplay the moment, Chen casually mentioned that he had been training hard lately. Radiant and still a little stunned, the girl handed over the package, wished him a good day, and hurried off, leaving Chen puzzled by her exaggerated reaction. But time was short. He rushed inside, threw his coat over his shoulder, and checked the clock. Today was a decisive day. After his grandfather's funeral, he couldn't afford to be late. Meanwhile, at the top of a luxurious skyscraper, the mood was heavy. Mr. Yu, a seasoned and ruthless businessman, reviewed documents with disdain, surrounded by subordinates who barely dared to breathe. Irritated by the growing influence of the Lin family in business, the boss listened to a dark suggestion from one of his advisors. Perhaps it was time to simply remove Mr. Lin from the path to guarantee total control of the market. Frustrated with the team's mistakes, Mr. Yu slammed the papers onto the table and demanded immediate solutions. The atmosphere in the office was pure pressure. He wanted results on the mission they had been given, emphasizing that it involved his own daughter and that failure would not be tolerated. The subordinates, cornered, assured him that the plan was already in motion and that the outcome would come soon. Meanwhile, night fell under a steady rain at the cemetery. Chen stood silently in front of his grandfather's grave, sheltering himself with an umbrella. He placed a flower on the headstone and made one final prayer, wishing the old man to rest in peace. For the young man, that moment marked the beginning of his new life, as if the transformation he had undergone were a blessing left behind by the deceased. A few meters away, the mood among the relatives was filled with bitterness. Tired of waiting in the rain, the cousins complained about back pain and wasted time, only to be scolded by their mother, who reminded them that Chen had paid for the entire funeral. The uncle, envy written all over his face, whispered that the money had to be dirty, while the aunt noticed, impressed, how her nephew seemed like a completely different person in just a few days. Even as the uncle tried to maintain a supportive posture, telling Chen not to blame himself for the loss, the aunt couldn't hold back. With a sharp and inquisitive tone, she demanded to know where so much money had come from to organize an event of that scale. Before the argument could escalate, her husband tried to cut off the conversation, but the family tension under the rain made it clear that Chen's new status was already bothering the opportunists waiting for a chance. The aunt kept complaining, accusing her husband of only thinking about his own family and never managing to sell the old property. To end the discussion, Chen handed her a card containing $100,000. The condition was clear. No one would touch his grandfather's house. Shocked by the amount, she questioned the origin of that fortune, but the young man responded coldly that the money was not inheritance and that the rest was none of their business. Before leaving, Chen made one final request to his uncle, that he take the cousins to spend the New Year holidays at the old man's house. Under the rain still falling at the cemetery, he walked toward the gate, promising his grandfather that he would use his new abilities to build a Dostoy life. Back at the apartment, exhaustion finally hit. Chen collapsed onto the living room floor, but the fatigue quickly turned into satisfaction when he checked the positive balance displayed on the computer screen. Everything was paying off. The silence was broken by voices at the door. When he opened it, he came face to face with a man and a young woman. The girl immediately began to explain herself, making it clear that during their last encounter, she had not abandoned him by choice. Her father stepped in, explaining that his daughter had also been injured by the criminals, and that they had only survived because the police arrived in time. He deeply thanked Chen for protecting Jia, his only daughter, and invited him to a special dinner, promising a reward for his heroism. Chen tried to refuse the invitation, but Jia insisted with a look that completely disarmed him. Seeing the sincerity and enthusiasm from both of them, the protagonist paused and eventually accepted. It was time to see where this new connection would lead. The car stopped in front of an imposing building filled with history. As he stepped inside, Chen was impressed by the vast collection and questioned whether the family truly made a living from the antiques market. The host simply smiled, confirming his interest in the business while guiding the group through the luxurious hallways of the mansion. Before moving on, the man instructed Jia to rest in her room, and she said goodbye to Chen, promising they would meet again soon. The protagonist rode the elevator alongside the homeowner and one of his bodyguards to an isolated room. On the floor, the scene was grim. The The criminal who had caused trouble was completely broken, begging for mercy. Between sobs, the man swore he would never have touched the girl if he had known who her father was. Mr. Yu leaned over the prisoner and presented the situation to Chen as if it were a gift of gratitude. The young man could barely connect that ruined figure to the furious criminal he had faced earlier. With no patience for pleas, the master gave the final order for his subordinate to put an end to the problem. While the situation was handled in the corner of the room by armed men, the host changed his tone, inviting Chen upstairs for tea. The young man decided the best move was to observe and save his questions for later. Once seated in the office, silence filled the space between them. Suddenly, the system interface flashed before Chen's eyes, offering him a new function, the ability to evaluate objects. The game was about to level up once again. The shelves in the office were like a private museum, and Chen's new ability allowed him to see beyond appearances, revealing technical data about each item. The host, noticing the young man's interest, generously offered any piece from the collection as a gift. Chen sincerely praised the collection, but the system soon detected an anomaly among the relics, a vase glowing with the label, Modern Art. Curious, the protagonist pointed at the piece, and Mr. Yu immediately ordered a subordinate to bring it over for inspection. With the object in hand, the confirmation appeared on the system screen. It was a modern replica. Chen hesitated, considering sparing the businessman's pride, but Mr. Yu's sharp gaze left no room for secrets. The homeowner revealed, with a hint of satisfaction, that he had spent tens of millions on that antique. Chen's shock was almost physical. While the wealthy man boasted about the astronomical price, the system displayed the harsh truth. The vase was worth no more than 578 yuan. After a moment of tense silence, honesty won out, and Chen bluntly stated that the piece was fake. He tried to take back his words immediately, fearing the reaction, but Mr. Yu simply handed the object back to the guard with a cunning smile, praising the young man's sharp eye. Instead of taking offense, the businessman placed a new item on the table, an exclusive invitation to a major auction. The challenge was simple. Chen should accompany him to hunt for real treasures. Back in his chair, the protagonist stared at the invitation, realizing that his new gift had just opened the doors to the underground world of the elite. A strange glow appeared before Chen, revealing the image of an unknown girl who seemed to emerge from the invitation itself. He realized immediately that envelope was not ordinary, and accepting Mr. Yu's offer would bring rewards far beyond money. When the businessman reinforced the invitation to the auction, the protagonist stored the document and confirmed his attendance without hesitation. The conversation was interrupted by Jia's arrival, announcing that an uncle was already waiting at the reception. Her father asked her to keep the young man company, while he handled business with the new visitor. Sitting beside Chen, the girl tried to start a conversation about what he and her father had been discussing. Upon learning the topic was antiques, she vented with a bored tone, commenting on how her father loved diving into tedious conversations even when no one else was interested. Chen, however, noticed something more urgent, the injury on Jia's hand. She explained, resigned, that recovery would take at least a month and that there was nothing to do but wait. That was when the protagonist reached into his pocket and held out a small glowing sphere. He quickly improvised, saying it was medicine left by his grandfather, saved only for emergencies. Jia stared at the radiant pill in disbelief. She felt that the item was far too valuable to waste, and questioned whether he truly wanted to give something so rare to her. With complete confidence, Chen simply reaffirmed that he knew exactly what he was doing, making it clear that her well-being was worth the sacrifice of the family item. Chen assured her it wasn't a problem, since he had the recipe and could make more if needed. Jia accepted the medicine, and the moment the pill went down, an intense warmth spread through her body, bringing an electric and unfamiliar sensation. Slightly embarrassed, she looked away, trying to process the strange energy flowing through her. Taking advantage of the moment, the young man mentioned that he would accompany her father to the auction and, with a teasing tone, asked whether she would be going as well. The girl was so startled that she jumped, and in that movement, the heavy bandage simply slipped off her arm. Chen, holding the invitation, pointed with a smile toward the now free limb. The healing had been instantaneous. Jia tested her movements in disbelief and, in a burst of pure joy, crushed Chen in a tight hug, promising that he would be richly rewarded for that. Feeling slightly awkward with the closeness, the protagonist gently stepped back, commenting that she was going a bit too far. Blushing with embarrassment, the girl covered her face and rushed out, claiming she was going to check whether the snacks were ready. On her way out, she nearly ran into her father, who was entering the room completely confused. Mr. Yu froze when he saw his daughter running without bandages or cast, which were now nothing more than trash scattered across the floor. He looked at the remains of the dressing and, with the smile of someone who understood the message, called for Chen to leave. When the young man asked about Jia, the businessman brushed it off, saying she would soon return to her studies and that he shouldn't worry. Near the exit, the host handed over the combat outfit, a robe and a mask. Anonymity was the golden rule of the auction, and Chen agreed immediately. What intrigued Mr. Yu the most was the young man's silence. He noticed that Chen hadn't asked a single question about the miraculous healing, even with the evidence lying right there on the carpet. Chen realized that Mr. Yu was not an open book. The man was full of mysteries. The auction hall was already packed, with the stage set for the show to begin. Amid the movement, the businessman casually mentioned to an acquaintance that he had brought a trusted assistant, referring to Chen. The protagonist smiled behind the mask, knowing that his sharp eye for evaluation would be the perfect secret weapon in that environment. As he walked, a young woman in a white lab coat and her team noticed the masked man's presence and waved, curious. Chen took the opportunity to test his system on people. When he focused on a woman named Boyuing, he nearly froze in shock. She had levels and detailed stats, just like beings from the immortal world. He began scanning the crowd, realizing with satisfaction that no disguise or wealthy appearance could hide the true intentions and abilities of those present. Mr. Yu, overflowing with confidence, reinforced that money was not an issue and that Chen could choose any item he liked. The young man brushed it off, saying he wasn't there to spend, but the boss insisted with a friendly pat on the shoulder, reminding him that his bank account could handle the cost. Chen simply smiled, focused on finding something that was truly worth the investment. The ceremony began with a hostess stepping onto the stage under the watchful eyes of the audience. She announced that the focus of the night would be relics from the Shank dynasty and quickly revealed the first star of the auction, a vase from the Jin dynasty, adorned with a finely detailed phoenix. The opening bid? A modest 30 million. The big players game had officially begun. The luxury showcase kept rolling out extremely expensive pieces, a bowl decorated with grapes for 10 million and a jade dragon worth 5 million. Chen watched everything from his seat with obvious boredom, noticing that Mr. Yu also didn't seem impressed by that soulless display of wealth. The atmosphere shifted when an employee brought out a dented and dull-looking item protected under glass, a small bronze bell. The protagonist nearly jumped out of his chair. The object triggered a sense of familiarity that was impossible to ignore. When the auctioneer announced the starting bid of only 50,000 yuan, the audience reacted with mockery, complaining that the item was broken junk and not worth the effort. Ignoring the rich crowd's jokes, Chen felt his heart start racing as he recognized a fragment of his memories in that object. Mr. Yu, confused by the young man's sudden reaction, questioned whether he was truly interested in something so simple. Chen tried to use his appraisal ability, but the system froze. The status window remained blank, unable to determine the artifact's origin. At that exact moment, a supernatural vision struck him. A demonic figure appeared in his mind, whispering about stolen time and space from the immortal palace of Yao. When he opened his eyes, the need was physical. He had to obtain that bell. Chen turned toward the businessman with cold determination, making it clear that this was the only item that mattered. While other buyers began placing low bids just for fun, the protagonist prepared his move, irritated by the arrogance of those who had no idea what kind of power they were underestimating. Chen soon realized he wasn't alone in the competition. 2 other bidders in the hall were also eyeing the bell with suspicious interest. It became obvious that they knew the object was worth far more than its appearance suggested. One rival shot a look of disdain toward the young man, commenting to his partner that the kid had also realized the relic's value, while the woman urged him to close the deal quickly and stop wasting time. The strategy shifted when the competitor called over an employee and presented a box containing a massive green stone, demanding an immediate appraisal to use it as his bid. Mr. Yu explained to Chen that at that level of auction, he would need to offer something of equal or greater value to win the exchange. The protagonist reflected for a second and decided to step into the high-risk game. He signaled to the appraiser and, with complete confidence, offered one of his medicinal pills, claiming that the tablet was capable of curing any illness. The employee hesitated, surprised by the boldness, but took the item for evaluation by the specialists. Behind the scenes, rumors spread quickly. No one could believe that someone would show up with a miracle drug at a high-end auction. Meanwhile, the rival and his companion watched from a distance, nervously waiting for the evaluator's verdict to see who would walk away with the bell. The female competitor kept her eyes locked on Chen, trying to figure out who was hiding behind the butterfly mask. On the other side, the protagonist simply held a faint smile, radiating the confidence of someone who already knew the outcome. On stage, the experts whispered among themselves in shock. The young man was far too young to be a real alchemist, but the pill's effectiveness was undeniable. They quickly concluded that securing an alliance with someone capable of producing medicine of that level would be the greatest advantage their family could obtain. The tension in the hall was palpable. While some members of the audience bet on Chen's failure, the appraiser returned with the final verdict. The hostess wasted no time and struck the gavel, announcing to the entire audience that the item offered by Mr. Butterfly had an immeasurable value, far surpassing the rival's precious stone. Defeated, the competitor, nicknamed Mr. Wolf, tried to maintain his composure, pretending he didn't care about the bell and conceding the lot with an ironic nod. Chen acknowledged the gesture with a sharp look, knowing he had just won his first major battle of influence. The victory was sealed with enthusiastic congratulations from the auction staff. Hours later, the scene changed dramatically. Back in his apartment, under the orange glow of the sunset pouring into the room, Chen sat on the edge of his bed. The noise of the auction was long gone, and now absolute silence filled the space as he held the bronze bell in his hands. The object, which to everyone else was just scrap metal, pulsed with energy, ready to reveal the secrets connecting him to the world of immortals. The protagonist stared at the metallic artifact, trying to force the system to reveal its secrets, but the interface gave no response. The silence from the technology left him intrigued. Examining the bell from another angle, he noticed a subtle glow and identified runes typical of the immortal realm. That was when the realization hit. The connection between his reality and the divine plane was far more direct than he had imagined. Excited by the discovery that others might be crossing these boundaries, Chen wasted no time. He sat down, entered a meditative trance with the bell and the mirror in his hands, and leaped into the divine world. When he appeared inside the Purple Palace, the surprise was immediate. The bell had traveled with him. Upon activating his special vision, the technical information remained blocked, but the inscriptions now made sense, describing cosmic cycles of stars and celestial bodies. As he deciphered the text, the environment suddenly shifted. The sky exploded into vibrant colors, and from the intense glow of the artifact, a female figure emerged. The magical creature floated gracefully, and without warning, flew straight toward Chen, hugging him with contagious joy. He froze in place, trying to understand why a complete stranger with purple hair was showing him such affection. However, the mood changed quickly. The girl stepped back, sat down in front of him, and stared at him with clear disdain. In a stern tone, she questioned whether he was truly the one responsible for summoning her. While Chen struggled to process the girl's radiant beauty, the golden bell began spinning wildly in the air, wrapped in light. She approached, visibly irritated by the situation, and made it clear that she had no idea who he was. Slightly stunned by her presence, Chen blurted out that she looked like a genie from an ancient legend. He tried to explain himself, claiming that the summoning had happened because of visions connected to a chaotic deity and certain barriers he needed to overcome. The girl let out a mocking smile, revealing that the entire story was fabricated. She explained that she used mysterious terms only to spark curiosity and force someone to summon her. Annoyed, Chen demanded to know how she had ended up in the real world, but her answer came in the form of sarcasm. She didn't even believe that place was reality. With a provocative tone, the boy claimed that he had inherited that world from his grandfather. The girl paused, suspicious, questioning whether he was truly the owner of the Purple Palace or if the story about being the heir was nothing but empty talk. Before the argument could continue, Chen felt a heavy surge of energy and warned that something inside the palace needed to be checked. There was no time to react. A gigantic demon suddenly appeared out of nowhere, beginning a massacre. Chaos erupted. On the ground, warriors struggled to hold back the infernal horde. A veteran and his allies carved a path through the creatures with blasts of shining lightning. The desperation was obvious. The man shouted to a young girl that the monsters had been unleashed and ordered her to flee to Quinyang to request reinforcements. The news was grim. The Yunhai Palace had been wiped off the map. In the middle of the fight, one subordinate questioned what would happen to them, but the old warrior roared that the priority was to protect Lanao, since the master had entrusted her with the sealing technique. Their escape, however, was cut short by imposing figures that blocked their path. It was Zhang Shun. The group reacted with fury, calling him a traitor for bringing outsiders to invade the palace. Without showing a shred of remorse, Zhang Shun faced his former allies, surrounded by the strangers he had personally guided there. Zhang Shun spat his words with contempt, revealing that he had never felt even a drop of loyalty toward Yunshui Palace. 40 years of deception had been nothing more than a climb up the ranks. Stunned, Lao demanded to know how a worm like him had discovered the path to the secret chamber, a place that was supposedly inaccessible. The traitor simply smiled, mocking the arrogance of his former comrades who believed they were the only guardians of that secret. The tension grew heavier. Greed overflowed from Jian Shun's eyes as he stared at the group. Suddenly, a blazing mark lit up on the young girl Linao's forehead, and her eyes turned completely red. Sensing the danger, the veteran Lao focused his energy, becoming surrounded by a bluish electric aura. His allies followed suit, unleashing bursts of lightning to clear a path forward. A giant with flaming eyes charged at them like a tank, but the ground rose violently, interrupting the impact. The clash escalated when one of the warriors attempted to crush the enemy barrier with a strike powerful enough to scatter clouds. Whirlwinds of blue energy surrounded the old man and the girl, while the enemy, in a mocking tone, offered them an alliance. The answer came in the form of a massive fire dragon launched straight at the traitor. The villain remained unfazed. With a brutal motion, he raised his hands and dispersed the flaming beast. Furious, he ordered the girl's immediate execution. Jian Shun advanced toward the old man with a sadistic grin, eager to see how much life force the veteran still had left to burn. Amid the crossfire, the old master realized they wouldn't last much longer. He grabbed the girl, gave her a desperate push, and ordered her to lock herself inside the secret chamber while he held off the pursuers. Linao leaped onto a safe platform on the mountain and, looking back in terror, shouted for the man who was willing to give his life for her. The girl ran for her life, her heart pounding in her throat while chaos exploded behind her. Jian Shun moved in for the final strike against the veteran, but Lao refused to surrender. In a swift act of concentration, he summoned chains of white water that burst from the ground in violent whirlpools, striking the masked warrior who was attempting to flank him. Jian Shun braced himself against the crushing pressure of the water and, with an explosive leap, tried to strike the old man from above. Lao reacted in time, blocking the sequence of attacks with his bare hands, ensuring that the young girl gained distance. She didn't stop running until she reached a gigantic wall covered in magical symbols. The moment she stretched out her arm to activate the seal of the passage, a colossal fighter appeared out of nowhere and threw a brutal punch meant to crush her. The impact echoed sharply, but the girl vanished in a burst of flames before the blow could land. Jian Shun arrived moments later and informed the giant that the defense mechanism of the secret chamber would remain locked for days. The brute, furious, insisted that he had felt the strike connect and that she should not have survived. Reality, however, was cruel. The young girl had been thrown into a deep cave, dragged by the force of the impact, until she landed at the center of a mystical pentagram. Outside, the veteran faced the invaders with pure contempt, outraged to see experienced warriors unite to hunt down a single girl. While the conflict raged below, Chen watched everything from the top of a tree, with his new and mysterious companion sitting beside him, wearing a smile that showed she was clearly entertained by the chaos. Chen jumped down from the tree and assured the old man that he was there to save the girl. Upon hearing that, Lao became certain that this was the ally she had been waiting for. With his strength nearly exhausted, the veteran begged the young man to follow her to the secret chamber before it was too late. In one final effort, Lao burst into flames, launching a sphere of red energy from his mouth to clear a path while shouting for Chen to run. Jian Shun watched the scene with disdain, mocking that two youngsters would make no difference. He attempted to intercept them with an aggressive leap, but Chen was faster. He left the branch behind and collided head-on with the villain in midair. The impact was brutal. With a full-force strike, Chen sent Jian Shun flying, smashing his back against the temple stones. Landing near the entrance, Chen was already holding a magical tablet ready for use. His new companion appeared right behind him, praising his fighting skills in an ironic tone. Fallen and bleeding, Jian Shun lost his patience and ordered his subordinates to slaughter the pair immediately. Warriors surrounded the two from all sides, but Chen showed no fear. He took his stance, gathering an intense glow in his hands to repel the first wave of attacks. While he blocked the strikes, the mysterious purple-haired girl touched his shoulder, smiled, and said she wanted to join the fun as well. Chen hesitated, asking if she could handle it, but she simply covered his face with her hand, telling him to shut up and move. Without looking back, Chen dashed toward the girl's hiding place, while his partner ran beside him, swinging the magical bell. At the top of the stairs, Jian Shun could only watch, defeated and unable to move. The enemy refused to accept defeat. Foaming with rage, he shouted that it was impossible for him to be beaten and unleashed the thousand-sword strike against the fleeing duo. The purple-haired girl didn't hesitate. She hurled her magical bell with incredible precision, striking the villain in the chest and sending him flying from the impact. A burly ally rushed forward to help the fallen leader, complaining that it was shameful to be humiliated by brats. He ordered the other soldiers to stop the intruders at any cost, and with a rough gesture, summoned demonic shadows that rose from the ground. The giant charged at Chen and the girl, certain that this would be their end. But she simply waved her hand, causing a blinding solar glow to appear out of nowhere. Before the giant could react, Chen struck him from the side with lightning speed. The impact opened a nasty wound in the brute's ribs, forcing him to retreat in terror. Seeing his partner in critical condition, John Shun trembled and shouted his name. With a mocking tone, the girl made the bell resonate above her and warned that if they were smart, they would collect their friend's body and disappear while they still had the chance. As the enemies retreated carrying the wounded man, the attention shifted back to the ground, where the old Lao was cornered. The girl wasted no time. She sent down a beam of golden light from the sky like a shield, followed by blasts of fire that swept away the remaining soldiers. The explosion of energy cleared the battlefield, securing the veteran's safety. After the massacre, the young woman landed gently in front of Lao. The old man stared at her in shock, but she didn't give him time for gratitude. In a firm, commanding tone, she demanded to know which demon and which pillar his clan was trying to escape from. Lao froze, realizing that this girl knew far more about the divine war than she let on. Lao paused to catch his breath and revealed that the chaos was caused by the demon of the sixth pillar. Even though he was impressed by how easily the young woman had wiped out the enemies, the veteran explained that the opponent was Samadhi, a monster that spat fire but had not yet reached its dragon form. The bell rang once more, and the girl announced that she would check on the condition of the injured young woman. As a sign of deep respect, Lao bowed, placing all his hopes in her and in Chen. Meanwhile, John Shun appeared from the flank in a fury, shouting that the girl should already be dead. Completely unhinged, he drew a demonic blade and swore he would send Chen straight to hell. The villain hurled the blood-stained weapon, but before it could reach its target, Chen and his companion vanished into thin air. They instantly reappeared in front of the magical wall, where the pentagram glowed intensely. Chen was about to try opening the passage, but the immortal stepped forward first, activating her magic. Under a blinding light and waves of energy, the rock began to crack and split apart, revealing the entrance to the cave. Inside, the scene was devastating. The girl's body lay stretched out on the ground, showing no signs of life. Chen picked her up in his arms, desperate to use a medicinal pill left by his grandfather. The immortal, however, wrapped her arms around him from behind and delivered the bitter truth. The girl's heart was no longer beating, and ordinary medicine would not work. Changing tactics, the companion pointed to a specific spot and ordered him to place the body there. She decided to use her own spiritual powers to attempt a resurrection, but made it clear that such an act would require proper payment for the sacrifice of her energy. Without hesitation, Chen agreed to the terms. The immortal let out a sarcastic laugh, noticing that Chen had accepted the deal without even blinking. Suspicious, he looked at his girlfriend's lifeless body and asked if he had fallen into some kind of trap, but the answer came with cold mockery. Now it was too late for regrets. The purple-haired girl floated into the air, letting the mystical bell ring above her head. With her eyes closed and arms wide open, she invoked a forbidden spell, whispering that time itself would begin to reverse. The surroundings were swallowed by a blinding glow and trails of spiritual fire as she manipulated the years to run in the opposite direction, forcing life to return to what had been lost. In the middle of that storm of energy, Chen held the immortal, worried about the toll it was taking on her. She hugged him back, assuring him that the girl would wake up within moments, but soon demanded her share of the agreement, pulling him closer while beams of light replenished her own essence. The recovery was obvious. The immortal's vitality overflowed once again. With a relieved smile, Chen noticed that the girl was finally showing signs of life. The saint watched with curiosity as the young woman, after a long silence, suddenly woke up with a jolt. Gasping and in shock, she sat up on the ground, trying to understand how she was still breathing. Still trembling, the young woman stared at her own hands, processing the miracle, unable to form a single word. Chen approached and handed her a golden pill, insisting that she take it to recover her strength. Dazed, the girl accepted the medicine, still unable to believe that she had escaped the grip of death. Still shaken, the girl looked at Chen and asked if he had really brought her back. Before he could answer, the immortal hugged her from behind in a playful tone, making it clear that the miracle was her doing. Regaining her senses, The young woman looked at the two strangers and asked who her saviors were. At that moment, the immortal displayed the golden bell and solemnly declared that, from that instant on, Chen was her new master. The boy, slightly embarrassed, asked if she was serious, and with a quick gesture, she summoned a magical servant, promising that she would fulfill any of his wishes. In a spin wrapped in light, the immortal changed her clothes into a flawless white outfit and teased Chen. Asking if he truly wanted that, he simply reassured her, reminding her that they still had unfinished business. Meanwhile, the rescued girl watched the scene in shock, thinking the savior was acting far too boldly. She finally swallowed the golden pill and felt an unprecedented wave of life energy flow through her veins. The effect was so intense that her body began to transform and her old clothes tore apart. Dying of embarrassment, she quickly tried to cover herself, apologizing for the state she was in. The immortal, always bold, stepped closer and embraced her, commenting that beauty like hers should never be hidden. Now fully recovered, the young woman bowed before Chen in gratitude and asked about the invaders' whereabouts and the condition of the clan elders. Chen answered directly. The attackers were dead. The immortal added more information, stating that the elders were safe but completely exhausted after the battle. The energy of the fight still lingered as the group rushed toward the palace. When they reached the staircase, the scene was pure horror. Bodies were scattered all along the path. The sanctified young woman froze when she saw the veteran Lao. He was in terrible shape, covered in bruises and clearly at his physical limit. Even in that state, the old man smiled, relieved to see her alive. The contrast between his joy and his ruined body left the girl in shock. With no time for long farewells, Lao's body began to break apart and fade into the air. In his final seconds, he shouted for her to flee to Quinyang and finish what had begun at Yunui Palace. She bowed in respect, promising with a trembling voice that she would fulfill her mission. Curious and impatient, Chen demanded to know what the hell had happened there. The girl explained that Yunui Palace had fallen after an internal betrayal allowed the hidden sand village to invade. The worst part, the seal of the mountain gate had been broken, releasing a demon. Chen asked for details about the creature, but realized the girl knew very little. He reflected that, in his original world, demons did not exist. She then described the structure of the Great Desert, where 7 demonic pillars supported evil, ranging from the undead at the top to Diang at the base. Upon hearing that the enemy came from the 6th pillar, Chen assumed it must be one of the most powerful beings in the hierarchy. However, the girl corrected his assumption, explaining that the numbering did not represent strength level, but rather the chronological order in which they had been imprisoned. Curious about the logistics of the invasion, Shang questioned how the attackers had managed to cross the treacherous waters of the Sosui River, which was supposed to be an impenetrable barrier protecting the palace. Lan suspected the invaders had moved in quietly, hiding in the Yanggu River to avoid detection. With no concrete information about their whereabouts, the young woman decided the group needed to reach the city of Jinyang as soon as possible to warn Lady Liu Cha. The objective was clear: secure reinforcements to hunt down the demons that had escaped. She explained to her new allies that Liu Cha, along with her family, had been responsible for sealing the demon Samadhi in the past. Now that the creature was free, revenge against the lady was a very real threat. Lan also revealed that she carried a secret message from the palace master. That scroll was the only way for Liu Cha to contain the monster once again. With the plan set, the group prepared to return to Quinyang after a long absence. A blue flash surrounded them all, initiating the teleportation. When the light faded, Chen and his companions appeared in the heart of a dense forest. Looking around, the boy found himself staring at a luxurious and imposing palace shining between the trees. Feeling uneasy, Lan commented that the trail of destruction might have reached that place as well, but the immortal quickly dismissed the idea. Pointing at the structure, she noted that the magical defenses, 10 layers of protective circles, were still intact. Chen signaled for them to move forward, but they barely took 2 steps before being surrounded by armed guards. In an aggressive tone, the soldiers demanded identification. Without losing her composure, the young woman mourned the destruction of Yunshui Palace, worried about the fate of the other survivors. Dressed in a vibrant red outfit, the lady observed the movement below. As she noticed their approach, she felt that the face of the young visitor seemed strangely familiar. Surrounded by a crimson aura, Liu Cha leaped down from the wall and landed gracefully in front of them, immediately greeted by the soldiers. The atmosphere turned tense when the envoy from Yunui Palace bowed and delivered the tragic news. The palace had been devastated, and the demon was now on the loose. Direct and composed, Liu Cha asked whether the palace master had sent any code or secret message. The young woman confirmed that she was the master's trusted disciple and heard from the lady that the creature had already attempted to attack the city, but retreated to an unknown location after failing. During the conversation, Liu Cha mentioned that another survivor from Yunui, a girl named Yao Air, was taking refuge there. Relieved, the disciple revealed that Yao was her personal attendant and felt grateful to learn that, despite having a broken arm, she was still alive. However, Liu Cha's gaze soon shifted to Chen and the Immortal. Suspicious, she commented that neither of them seemed to belong to the Yunshui clan. The young woman quickly stepped in, assuring her that they were her saviors and deserved to be treated with honor. The disciple formally introduced Chen and his companion. As Liu Cha looked directly at the Immortal, a sudden memory flashed through her mind, giving her the feeling that she had encountered that presence long ago. With no time for nostalgia, the lady suggested that everyone head into the city to rest, while she personally focused on reinforcing the region's magical barriers. After giving her instructions, Liu Cha dashed away, leaving Chen and his partner to continue toward the lodging area. The group walked through the bustling market of Quinyang, a metropolis with nearly 3,000 years of history, located near the legendary tomb of Fuxi. It was the beating heart of the southeastern region of the continent. The Immortal looked around with a sense of confusion, commenting that the place was completely unrecognizable. Curious, Chen asked what it used to look like, and she described a scene of abandonment and ruins, with barely anyone around. As they walked, Zong noticed a customer buying a bird and paying with coins that had holes in the center. She grew thoughtful upon realizing that this ancient monetary system was still the standard there. To show off her own wealth, the Immortal materialized a magical gold coin, and with a simple motion, made an entire pile of them appear in the palm of her hand. Chen quickly stepped in with an economic warning, explaining that flooding the market with that much money out of nowhere would cause inflation. Confused, she asked what that meant, and he gave her a quick lesson about price imbalance. Even while displaying luxury and gold, the Immortal questioned, with a hint of doubt, whether the rules from Chen's world truly applied to that mystical reality. Ignoring the technical discussion, the girl walked up to a vendor and used the gold to buy candied treats on sticks. Chen grabbed one of the red skewers to taste it, while Sun tried offering another to the group's young saint. Lan politely declined, but the Immortal dove into the tasting, amazed by the sweet flavor spreading across her palate as she continued exploring the market. While enjoying the treat, the Immortal suddenly froze. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a strange presence, a man in a green suit holding a fan, watching everything from within the crowd. Before she could react, the figure vanished into the sea of people. Chen noticed the distant look in his companion's eyes and asked what was wrong. With an enigmatic smile, she replied that it seemed she had just run into an old acquaintance, even though she had no idea how that person had ended up there. The group eventually arrived at the city's official residence. Lan, the young saint, quickly said goodbye to her new friends, eager to reunite with her attendant. She rushed through the palace gates like lightning, and upon entering the chambers, embraced Yao tightly. However, the relief did not last long. As soon as she noticed the servant's injured arm, guilt overwhelmed her, and she asked how she had managed to endure such pain. Yao tried to reassure her mistress, saying that the worst had already passed, and soon asked about the palace elders. The atmosphere grew heavy. With sadness in her voice, Lan revealed that the masters had sacrificed their lives so she could make it safely to Quinyang. Sitting down with a distant gaze, Yao declared that if Lan died, she would have a chance to live. Before Lan could fully process the betrayal, Yao drew a blade, and demonic energy surged from her arm. She shouted that all the members of the sect would be hunted down and killed, then lunged at her mistress in a frenzy of rage. With no other choice and driven purely by instinct, Lan reacted. With a sudden motion charged with blazing energy, she delivered a powerful strike that sent the servant flying across the room. The impact proved fatal for Yao's already corrupted body. Gravely wounded, the servant began to dissolve right before Lan's horrified eyes. Within seconds, she vanished completely, leaving behind nothing but a single small purple petal on the floor. Still in shock and holding the last remnant of her servant, Lan heard a suspicious noise coming from the street and rushed outside, fearing that the nightmare was only just beginning. Chaos erupted in the street as Lan, still in shock, ran toward Chen and his companion to make sure they were safe. The protagonist kept his composure, explaining that the Immortal had already sensed the ambush. Hidden warriors were surrounding the palace, and their only option was to strike first. As the group prepared for battle against the mercenaries emerging at the entrance, the Immortal remarked with disappointment that their enemies were still relying on predictable, outdated tactics. The fight barely even started for Chen. From the sky, A trail of red fire tore across the courtyard like a missile, crushing the invaders within seconds. Through the blazing flames, Liu Cha appeared in full authority, landing beside the guests. In a tone that suggested she was merely taking out the trash in her own home, she announced that the mansion's protective barriers were finally active. Now that they were safe, Lan could reveal the secrets of Yunshui Palace. Sensing that the matter was diplomatic, Chen stated that he and his partner would step away for a moment. As soon as they moved aside, Liu Cha raised an absolute isolation barrier around herself and Lan, preventing any sound from escaping. That was when the young saint began speaking in an ancient, mystical dialect. The lady froze upon recognizing the demonic language of her own bloodline. While she processed the revelation about the innate body and the awakening of the 5 colors, Chen and the immortal relaxed at a nearby stone table, being served food. However, the peace did not last long for Chen's companion. Her eyes instantly lit up as she picked up the frequency of the demonic language coming from the red formation. Intrigued by the power that had just awakened, the immortal stood up, focusing all her attention on the secret Liu Cha was trying to conceal. Liu Cha processed the information for a moment and decided she needed to go to the library. Her focus now was to decipher that awakening. She explained that the secret message required a flawless translation and then immediately asked about the whereabouts of the servant. With a heavy voice, Lan revealed the tragic outcome. The maid had turned into a threat and she had been forced to eliminate her. The lady showed no surprise. She coldly commented that many had fallen victim to the Hidden Sand's brainwashing techniques and advised the young woman not to carry the burden of that death. Lan remained silent, absorbing the weight of those words before asking what the true objective of that dark organization really was. Liu Cha smiled and revealed that the members of the Hidden Sand were seeking absolute immortality through forbidden teachings and the possession of ancient inheritances. After delivering the warning, the lady leaped into the sky and vanished, leaving behind the instruction that everyone should rest. Lan stood motionless, the idea of true immortals echoing repeatedly in her mind. Later, she sought refuge in a hot bath. Submerged in water filled with flower petals, she closed her eyes and allowed her thoughts to drift. Memories of the palace returned with force. She remembered the old master scolding her for falling asleep during her duties, and Yao's gentle voice defending her, saying her mistress had stayed up all night studying. In the memory, Yao hugged her while laughing, encouraging her studies as John and the old master joked about Lan's constant distraction. The scene was peaceful until the memory twisted. The image of the servant stretched out her hand and, in a demonic tone, asked why Lan had not killed her sooner. The shock was immediate. Lan snapped out of the trance in terror, jumping out of the bathtub and letting out a desperate scream that echoed throughout the entire room. Lan's heart pounded as she realized it had all been nothing more than a terrible nightmare. Still gasping for air, she whispered the names of her master and Yaoer, trying to calm herself down. In the same room, the immortal watched the scene with a faint smirk, quietly amused by the young woman's panic. Wanting to end the day, Chen announced that the next journey would be exhausting and that he needed to head to his own room to rest. However, the immortal blocked his path. She insisted that they would spend the night together so he could help restore her spiritual energy. Feeling awkward, the boy tried to dodge the situation, asking whether there was not a less direct method of recharging her magical reserves. With a teasing expression, she reminded him that he had awakened her so abruptly, so it was only fair that he now serve as her source of energy. Without giving him a choice, she stepped closer, pulled on his clothes, and rested her head on his leg, while Chen sat down on a bench. According to her, that physical contact was the fastest way to restore her original body. Their conversation was interrupted by Lan's voice coming from the doorway. The young saint, still shaken by her nightmares, asked to spend the night there, explaining that her fear of sleeping alone was stronger than her sense of protocol. The immortal, showing exaggerated hospitality, immediately agreed and pulled Lan inside. The girl in white grew tense upon realizing she would be sharing the space with the immortal and humbly suggested sleeping on the floor. Chen, trying to act like the gentleman in the story, offered to sleep on the couch outside, but the immortal refused. She displayed the bronze bell, reinforcing that he needed to stay nearby for the mana transfer. Lan, feeling safer with his presence, also grabbed Chen's clothing and pleaded for him not to leave. Surrounded by both of them and with nowhere to escape, the protagonist could only feel his face burning with embarrassment. As the girls settled in, Chen threw himself onto the bed, staring at the ceiling with a look of pure exhaustion and disbelief. He was still trying to process how his peaceful night of rest had turned into such chaos. Meanwhile, in another part of the mansion, a much heavier conversation was unfolding under strict secrecy. Liu Cha was receiving an enigmatic visitor, A woman in green, calmly drinking tea at the table. The hostess, visibly anxious, asked whether the interesting figure who had appeared in the city was truly the person she suspected. Upon hearing the name Song Ling, the visitor smiled, confirming that her awakening signaled the return of an ancient entity to the world. Leaning back in her chair with complete indifference, the mysterious woman suggested that it was already time to reveal to Song Ling the existence of the tomb of the Immortals. Liu Cha jumped to her feet, irritated and confused, demanding to know who was truly behind that awakening. She admitted that whenever she looked at the girl, she felt a mental block preventing her from accessing crucial memories from their shared past. The woman in green set her cup down and began speaking in an incomprehensible dialect, leaving Liu Cha even more frustrated for not understanding a single word. With a sarcastic smile, the guest explained that the secret was reserved only for those bound by destiny. A pink glow emanated from her glass as she delivered her final statement. Helping Song Ling was not just a favor, but the only way to fulfill the request of the goddess of mercy and save Liu Cha's own husband. Shocked, the lady of the palace questioned whether the entire situation was part of a larger plan. The visitor simply held her glass and concluded with a dark truth. Only those who have awakened understand that the gods are now chained to the 9 islands and can no longer leave them. The woman in green was straightforward. It was time to come clean about the tomb of the Immortals. According to her, that was the only way to seal the demon that had awakened in the mountain. Liu Cha, however, pushed back, arguing that the main entrance was already sealed and that finding a new access point would take time. Unshaken, the visitor explained that the monster was still hunting for the essence of fire in the mountain ranges, and that the real danger was it disturbing the entities that lived beneath the earth. Convinced, the hostess barely said goodbye before vanishing into thin air, leaving the room empty. The sun had barely touched the window when Chen opened his eyes and felt the weight of disaster. He was squeezed on the bed, with the immortal sleeping deeply, and her arm draped over him. The embarrassment hit instantly. Beside him, Lan woke up, and upon realizing she had spent the night pressed against a man, jumped in shock like a scene from a horror movie, scrambling away to the corner of the room, her face burning red with embarrassment. Taking advantage of the chaos, the immortal clung to Chen with a mischievous smile, making a bold comment about how delicious he was. Furious, the young man tried to push her away, demanding that she stop fooling around, but she was faster and climbed on top of him. With a playful look, Song suggested they start their morning spiritual maintenance. Chen, playing along with a sharp dose of sarcasm, fired back that he had already been serving as her battery all night and did not have much charge left. Relentless, the immortal tightened her grip, demanding more energy while pinning him down on the bed. The teasing only stopped when a servant shouted from the doorway that the city's ruler was there for an urgent meeting. With a quick gesture, Chen signaled that he was on his way, desperately trying to regain his dignity before facing the world outside. Chen had finally had enough of the teasing. In one swift motion, he grabbed the immortal's arms and pushed her aside, putting an end to the embarrassing situation. With a serious tone, he announced that it was time to leave, but she only gave a crooked smile, saying that, for now, she would let him off the hook. Annoyed, the boy muttered that Liu Cha's presence was starting to become a real nuisance. As they stepped out of the room, they found the ruler waiting in the main hall. She went straight to the point. The translation of the secret message from the master of Yun Shui was complete. The riddle revealed that the demon Samadon was locked inside the tomb of the Immortals, located on Mount Linyu, far to the southeast of Quinyang. The immortal fell silent, shocked that just a few words in that demonic dialect could conceal so many geographic and technical details. Liu Cha explained that since the known entrance to the tomb was sealed, the group would have to remain in the city while scouts searched for an alternative entry point. Thoughtful, Chen asked what exactly made that place so special. The young saint explained that the entire foundation of their clan's knowledge and power had come from studies conducted inside that ancient tomb. The protagonist gave a subtle smile, as if the pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. However, the moment of reflection in the courtyard was interrupted by a metallic sound echoing through the air. Liu Cha reacted instantly, recognizing the ringing of a bell and warning that something serious was beginning. Without hesitation, she dashed toward the noise, and Chen ordered his companions to follow her to uncover the source of the new threat. The moon shone high in the sky when Liu Cha leaped over the walls of the estate, slicing through the air at high speed. From above, she spotted a dark, pulsing mass advancing across the field with a sinister reddish glow. The shock was immediate. The demons had arrived much earlier than expected. A horde of predators with blazing eyes trampled everything in their path, Chen and the girls watched the scene with tension. He quickly identified it as an invasion of underworld beasts. A colossal creature leaped onto a boulder, snarling with a fury that made the ground tremble, while the rest of the pack charged forward in a final assault against the defenders. Without hesitation, Liu Cha took off into the air. Wielding a spear that radiated blinding energy, she dove straight into the center of the enemy army. The impact was devastating. Scarlet lightning streaked across the sky, and a storm of red energy exploded on the ground, sending monsters flying in every direction. Taking advantage of the opening, the fortress commander gave the order, and the cavalry charged into close combat. From the top of the wall, Chen stayed focused. He activated his analytical vision to measure the real threat and realized, to his surprise, that those shadow demons were only level 10. Turning to the immortal beside him, he asked whether she had any additional information about that specific type of creature, while she observed the massacre below with a calculating gaze. The immortal explained that those creatures were offspring of the earth itself, driven by the instinct to devour any living being. The real danger was the domino effect. When one fell, the others absorbed its demonic energy and became even more brutal. Lan, visibly shaken, recalled that this same plague had wiped out her village and her servant before disappearing without a trace. The atmosphere grew heavy when they realized the invasion was not random. Something catastrophic must have happened in the abyss. Seeing that the demons were tearing through the defensive lines, Chen gave the command, and the group leaped off the wall straight into the heart of the storm. Mid-air, he prepared his magical greatsword and unleashed a blast of fire that caused a massive explosion on the ground, wiping out dozens of monsters at once. Amid the smoke, an alpha predator resisted and snarled, but it was immediately struck by red lightning coming from all directions. Chen showed no mercy. He sprinted forward at high speed, planted a spear into the ground to gain momentum, and used his scarlet blade to pierce the beast's chest with a precise, surgical strike. While soldiers were being tossed around like rag dolls by the rest of the horde, the protagonist seemed to multiply across the battlefield. He impaled a monster mid-charge, and in a quick reflex, leaped sideways to grab a warrior who was about to be killed. The soldier, shocked and gasping for air, could barely express his gratitude while Chen was already preparing for his next target. The rescued soldier, still out of breath, thanked him for saving his life. Chen barely listened. He simply tightened his grip on the spear and dove back into the slaughter. He executed the spiral strike technique, creating a blue whirlwind that crushed the monsters around him and made the ground crack under the pressure. Even so, the number of enemies did not seem to decrease, which left him visibly irritated. On the flank, Liu Cha sliced through the air, impaling demons with surgical precision. From above, she analyzed the situation with concern. The monsters were saturated with dark energy, a clear sign that samadhi was the source of everything. Suddenly, the ground exploded with a deafening roar. A gigantic claw burst from the earth, followed by an alpha predator growling prophecies about a sea of blood and an age of destruction. Chen charged at the mutants, but as he got closer, his mind suddenly twisted into knots. A sudden vision of a mysterious girl appeared before him, screaming for someone named Tai. The hero staggered, clutching his head in confusion, trying to understand what that hallucination was in the middle of battle. A demon took advantage of the distraction to strike from behind, but Chen regained focus at the last second. With a look of pure contempt, he spun his spear, ready to test the blade against the beast's skull. While chaos ruled the battlefield, the woman in green remained inside the mansion, unaware of the fight outside. She moved pieces on a hidden bookshelf, whispering about red and green lotuses, until a purple artifact suddenly glowed intensely in the darkness of the empty room. Inside the mansion, the woman in green manipulated a mystical artifact pulsing in her hands. As soon as she touched the container, an explosion of light revealed disturbing visions, the ruins of an underwater city and a shattered divine statue. She realized the gravity of the situation. For millennia, that entity had contained the evil across the 9 islands, but with the monument now in pieces, the demonic energy had finally corrupted the abyss. Suddenly, the statue among the ruins opened furious red eyes. The shock was so overwhelming that the flask in the warrior's hands exploded, leaving her soaked and frozen in place as she processed the confirmation that an irreversible awakening had occurred. Meanwhile, the carnage in the forest clearing escalated to another level. A colossal demon, far larger than the common soldiers, fell from the sky, crushing everything below. Liu Cha did not retreat. She leaped toward the mutant, dodging a blast of black energy fired from the monster's mouth. In midair, She counterattacked with her flaming artifact, using her magical sword to repel the dark radiation before diving like a red meteor straight at the beast. Liu Cha unleashed a scarlet bolt directly from her hand, sentencing the creature to death. The monster roared, cornered on the ground, while a sinister blade gleamed from its claws. Watching from only a few meters away, Chen activated his analysis vision to measure the opponent's power. However, the system froze. For the first time, the interface reported that the origin and data of that demon were completely unknown, putting the protagonist on maximum alert. The system finally rebooted with a sinister warning. The enemy was an immortal shadow demon king. The creature possessed the bizarre ability to devour its own allies to regenerate. Chen felt the weight of the threat, but he did not back down. Activating the Thunder Dragon technique, he concentrated all the electricity into his spear and hurled it like a lightning bolt. The weapon pierced straight through the monster's chest, opening a massive hole. The Demon King howled in agony, and its scream became a macabre signal. Instantly, the lesser demons around it began to dissolve, turning into pure energy that was absorbed into their leader's wound. Chen watched in disbelief as the enemy's spiritual cannibalism ability sealed the hole within seconds. Wrapped in a dense, dark aura, the monster dropped to one knee, overflowing with hatred. In the middle of the chaos, Lan came running, trying to use her hands to form a shield, but Chen was faster. He rushed forward and protected her with his own body before the shockwave could strike her. In the sky, Liu Cha held her flaming sword ready, admitting that this type of immortal was the worst kind of threat they could face. The immortal wasted no time and jumped back into the offensive, firing a beam of blazing energy to clear a path. Chen seized the opening and launched himself forward, flying through the air with his sword in hand. The demon tried to crush him with a heavy strike mid-flight, but the protagonist executed a perfect evasive maneuver, positioning himself for the decisive counterattack as the energy of the battle electrified the entire battlefield. Chen pulled back with an acrobatic leap, creating distance before summoning a colossal blue energy dragon that dominated the sky. Using the momentum, he hurled his spear with lethal precision, decapitating the Demon King in one clean strike while gliding through the air. Liu Cha, circling the battlefield with her flaming blade, prepared to incinerate whatever remained of the creature. The victory, however, was a trap. The moment the monster's body burst into flames, a pulsating red core emerged from the wreckage, releasing hordes of new predators that sprouted from the fallen carcass. At the center of the mutation, a darker and far more sinister form rose, surrounded by an aura of blood and pure killing instinct. Liu Cha realized the worst had happened. The creature had evolved. The new demon spread its arms, generating spirals of scarlet energy that violently cracked the earth. Seeing that the situation had spiraled out of control, the ruler immediately ordered a retreat. The cavalry commander shouted for all surviving soldiers to fall back to the city walls. As the soldiers fled in panic, Liu Cha floated down to Chen and his allies. On the ground, the demonic fire did not fade. Instead, it transformed into a blazing shockwave that began devouring the forest in an unstoppable expansion. Chen did not hesitate. With a quick gesture, he summoned a radiant magical blade and plunged straight into the wall of flames. In an explosive advance, he activated the Four Directions technique, launching his flying sword like a heavy projectile. The weapon's impact against the ground halted the demon's advance and generated a shockwave that gave the cavalry enough time to reach the castle gates. Enraged, the monster leaped forward to counterattack, but Liu Cha descended from the sky like a meteor. She attempted to crush the creature with a brutal physical strike, but the demon's raw strength was superior. In a high-voltage clash, the woman was repelled with such force that she was hurled through the air, crashing into the slope of a nearby mountain. Without missing a beat, the beast moved to finish off the other two girls. The immortal, visibly exhausted, acted on pure instinct. She grabbed Lan to shield her just as the monster delivered a devastating kick. The impact was so brutal that cracks began to spread across the protector's body as they were thrown violently against the rocks. Seeing her allies fall, Liu Cha steadied herself in fury. Retrieving her magical spear, she admitted through clenched teeth that she had no other choice. She would have to fight with everything she had and reveal her true form if she wanted to survive. From above, she raised her weapon and hurled it with full force at the demon, which, cornered by the crushing pressure, stretched out its hand in a desperate attempt to block the fatal strike. The beast managed to knock the magic spear away with a sharp strike, sending the weapon flying. Liu didn't waste a second and dove from above like lightning, putting the full weight of her attack straight into the monster's skull. The creature started to break apart in midair, but the relief didn't last long. The atmosphere grew heavy, and Liu realized in horror that her opponent had just become even more terrifying. Even after draining her spiritual energy, she hadn't dealt any real damage. Without stopping, the girl leaped again and began hammering the demon with a barrage of heavy kicks while flames burst from the ground. Suddenly, the creature's body vanished beneath her feet. Before she could react, a black claw tore through the earth and locked onto her ankle. The shock turned into a scream when the monster treated her like a toy, hurling the young woman's body away with brutal force. Mid-air, Lou spotted the spear floating, surrounded by blazing fire. She regained her balance, spun in the air, and went all in. Charging at full speed, she delivered a precise strike that slammed the demon back to the ground once again. It happened so fast the monster had no time to react. It could only roll over on the ground, trying to track her movement. The beast gave her no breathing room and drove a violent knee into Lou's stomach, launching her away from the impact. Chen reacted instantly and caught the girl in his arms mid-flight, warning her to stay sharp. Once they hit the ground, he laid it out straight. The demon had infinite regeneration, and wiping out all that dark energy was going to be a serious job. The monster roared and charged, wrapped in flashes of red light, but the protagonist was one step ahead. Cutting through the forest, he activated the sealing sword technique, unleashing blue blades from every direction that locked onto the target with magical chains. Chen faced the creature head-on, challenging its healing ability with his own power as spikes erupted from the ground to pin it in place. The creature still tried to rise through pure hatred, but the hero pulled out the Moon Dragon ability. With glowing blue dragons blazing around him, the pressure became so overwhelming that the demon's body simply shattered, leaving behind nothing but a red core. As the stone flew into Chen's hand, the young woman watched in shock. In that moment, she was certain he was the awakened man she had been waiting for. What impressed her the most was seeing the young man absorb the demon's heart with his own ki as if it were nothing. Their allies realized Chen was pushing himself to the limit, ignoring the danger of the evil ki draining his own life. He made it clear, if he didn't destroy the demon's heart right then and there, all their efforts would be wasted and the monster would return. Without hesitation, he crushed the core with raw strength. A dense energy flooded the area before a blast lit everything up. Chong even prepared to step in with his bronze bell, but what appeared between Chen's fingers was a pure, glowing green stone. Lucha was overjoyed. Watching someone purify that dark energy and turn it into something natural was the final proof that the young man was the chosen one she had been waiting for over countless ages. But while she celebrated, Chen's consciousness was suddenly pulled into another dimension. He found himself in a strange, shadowy parallel world where a massive red flower bloomed right before his eyes. From inside the plant, a mysterious young woman emerged and called him by an unfamiliar name, celebrating his arrival. Even confused, he felt her touch on his face as she smiled, saying she had been waiting for him for a long time. Before fading completely into the void, the woman left behind a desperate command. He had to find her in the real world, no matter what. The immortal dove in free fall, grabbing the boy in a mix of panic and shock. What she held in her hands was not what she expected. The demonic heart was pure, something that should have been impossible. Still slightly dazed, the boy asked if the monster had truly been wiped out. Lucha, in a gesture of complete respect, bowed before him. She admitted she had no idea who he really was and begged him to awaken. Meanwhile, the dust was settling. A man examined a vibrant blue crystal, confused by the lady's words, when the sound of galloping suddenly cut through the air. The ground began to collapse, opening sinister craters beneath the horse's hooves. Taking command, the leader shouted for the troops to tighten formation immediately. They had arrived at the heart of the storm, right in the trail of brutal destruction. Near the mayor's mansion, a crowd gathered in the streets to witness the damage. In the middle of the commotion, the protagonist stood up, his fingers gripping a magic stone. The mood shifted inside the luxurious quarters they were given. Sue was left speechless by the level of luxury, but Chen didn't even blink. Completely mesmerized by the glow of the object in his hands, the girl couldn't hold back her curiosity. She stepped closer, almost invading the young man's personal space, and asked what was so special about that crystal. The protagonist wanted to know the price of the relic. Sho picked up the stone, explaining that it was condensed potassium jade, an absolute rarity that had nearly vanished after the heavenly tribulation ravaged the world. The conversation was interrupted by knocks on the door. A servant entered, bowing as he announced that the banquet was ready. The hero lit up instantly, jumping from his chair and calling his girlfriend to come along. Liusha, smiling from ear to ear, could only think about the food waiting for them. The banquet hall was packed. Surrounded by tables loaded with sweets and important guests, the lady took her place. Lucha, seated at the table, extended his hand to the protagonist in a formal apology for what had happened. But Chen's focus was elsewhere. He looked straight at the host and got right to the point, asking whether that demonic threat still had any chance of coming back. With a confident smile, Lucha revealed the big victory. The demonic key had been purified, and what remained was nothing but pure jade. The threat had been neutralized, ensuring that no monster would show up for a long time. Now, the mission had changed. Protect the resting place of the Immortals. Curious, the protagonist wanted to know why he was being called Awakened. The explanation was simple. Those who awaken are reborn with natural energy flowing through their veins, marked by an unmistakable emerald glow. The pieces clicked into place in the hero's mind. He remembered the flash of light that had blinded him moments earlier. Lucha confirmed that only someone with that gift could truly control Kai, and she became certain of his nature the instant he used that power to cleanse the beast's heart. While she devoured food at the banquet, the young man wondered if he really was the man from the prophecies. Suddenly, Lucha jumped to her feet, mentioning that Linzia, the head of the Chamber of Commerce, was in town and would have better answers. The scene shifted dramatically when the powerful immortal dropped to her knees, desperately begging for a single drop of that natural energy. The protagonist was stunned by her humiliation, while the host, terrified by the scene, pleaded for her to stand up. Yang kept eating as if nothing unusual was happening. Being honest, the young man admitted he had no clue how to control that power. Tasting a cherry, the immortal suggested they clear up their doubts with Jua at the Chamber of Commerce the next day. The tension faded with an embarrassed apology from Lu, but the hero quickly reassured her. The next day, the group crossed the busy marketplace. Cho led the way, excited about how close they were to their destination, when chaos suddenly broke out. A child ran desperately down the street, chased by a stranger who hurled a heavy chain to capture him. The metal slammed into the ground just inches from the boy. Before the worst could happen, the protagonist reacted fast, grabbed the fugitive by his clothes, and in a firm, calm voice assured him the danger had passed. The hero tried to calm the child, but the boy, still shaking, barely managed to say thanks before the chaos started again. Furious, Chen stared down the pursuers and demanded to know why they were hunting the kid. Losing patience, he ordered them to get lost. But one of the attackers leaped forward with his hands glowing in a threatening red light. Chen didn't hesitate. He prepared his defense, and with a crushing strike, slammed the fighter to the ground. Defeated and grumbling, the strangers backed off, satisfied just to confirm that their target was in the city. As the pair ran off, the protagonist watched the scene coldly. Sho stepped forward to examine the chains left behind, noticing that this type of equipment was standard military gear. The boy, identified as Chen Bao, gave a quick bow and was already preparing to make a run for it, but the hero's sharp look stopped him. "Give the wallet back," the young man demanded. Caught red-handed, the kid handed a purse to the girl and showed he had nothing else hidden. The commotion in the market grew when several pedestrians realized their belongings were missing. The boy was surrounded. When asked if the chase was because of the thefts, he shouted desperately that he didn't mean any harm. The explanation was cut short by a hard smack to the head. An old man appeared, demanding everything be returned. Chen Bao began handing the stolen items back to their owners while listening to lectures from the vendors. A bystander, trying to ease the tension, explained that the boy stole compulsively whenever he got nervous. Amid the general apologies, something in the scene caught Sho's attention. With her eyes lighting up, she pointed to an object ahead, suggesting it might be a legendary treasure chalice. The immortal, suspicious, shot the boy a sharp glance, wanting to confirm whether that relic was truly real or just another trick. Treasure? The boy froze, staring at the girl with genuine fear. He felt the weight of betrayal in the air, unable to understand how she knew so much about his life. Desperate, he tried to convince the group that everything was a lie, but the immortal was faster. She stepped forward and locked her hand onto his shoulder with crushing strength. With a sly smile, Sho admitted that his reaction had given everything away. She had already figured out his game. With no way out, the boy received an order. He would have to guide the group to the Chamber of Commerce. Trembling with anxiety, he pointed the way, still trying to keep up appearances by shouting that he would never accept being anyone's golden pawn. He even tried to stand up to the girl, demanding that she stop that sinister smile. When they reached the entrance of the imposing building, the boy tried to play it off and slip away with a forced grin. Sho gave him no opening. The threat was short and blunt. If he made one wrong move, he would lose his right leg. The immortal reinforced the warning with a piercing stare, making it clear there was no escape. With no other choice, the boy walked inside, trying to hide his nerves behind sudden curiosity about what they sold there. Lan quickly explained how the place worked. They didn't sell ordinary goods there. It was where the continent's currency was issued. The protagonist immediately realized the place functioned like a central bank. The girl added that the chamber also stored treasures and handled major deals. Without wasting time, she grabbed the hero by the hand so they could explore the interior. Inside, the boy tried to slip quietly into a discreet corner. He touched the floor and, impressed, sensed that countless valuables were hidden beneath his feet. The girl, without hesitation, picked up a massive golden pearl from a shelf, admiring the value of the piece. A maid panicked and rushed in, warning that touching the items was forbidden, but she was cut off. At the top of the stairs, an elegant woman dressed in green gave the order. The guests had full permission to take whatever they wanted. Surprised, the maid simply obeyed with a deep bow. The woman in green quickly established her presence, introducing herself as the director of the Chamber of Commerce and asking to be called simply Yi Jun. She cast a playful, knowing glance at the immortal, who responded with a sharp stare, choosing to maintain her earlier attitude. Jun commented to her companion about how rebellious she had been in her youth, while the protagonist studied the two of them, feeling that the woman's face wasn't unfamiliar. At that moment, Yang broke the tension and introduced the boy as his master. The introductions continued with the immortal embracing the saint, reinforcing the friendship between them, while the doe greeted Lady June formally. Little Chen Bao, still hunched over, was presented by Yang, but the director's eyes were fixed on the hero. She examined him carefully, sensing a different aura. He seemed like a fully awakened one, strongly resembling the presence of Tai. As she approached, June noticed spirals of blue energy swirling around the young man and grew tense, remembering that it had been ages since she had felt such pure, natural Kai. The intensity was so overwhelming that the woman suddenly hugged the protagonist, leaving him confused and startled. Regaining her composure, Jun apologized for the impulsive reaction and turned her attention to Chen, who was trembling in a corner of the room. She questioned why he had taken so long to seek her out, and the boy justified himself by saying he had barely set foot in Quinyang and hadn't had time for anything. Bringing the formalities in the hall to an end, June invited everyone upstairs for a more private conversation. Before heading up, the immortal tossed the valuable pearl to the doe, asking her to take care of the treasure. Once seated, the host served tea and got straight to the point, asking whether the hero wanted to master the cultivation of natural Kai. He confirmed that his goal was to learn how to control that power, but Jun brought reality into focus. He still hadn't activated his immortal veins. Without that step, releasing the energy would be impossible. Seeing Chen's surprise, she began explaining the complex workings of those sacred veins. Jun kept her eyes locked on the hero, explaining that his body was still far from reaching its full potential. Chen was shocked by how much she seemed to understand his nature. The director revealed that the immortal veins were the bridge between the soul and the physical body. Only through that connection would he gain total control over his own power. With a provocative tone, she dropped the final clue. What he truly needed was hidden inside the tomb of the Immortals. The protagonist, as a sign of respect, bowed deeply and thanked her for the guidance. The immortal decided it was time for the young man to step out, since she had private matters to discuss with the host. As soon as they were alone, she changed the subject. She grabbed Jun's hands, and without hesitation or politeness, demanded a fortune in coins to cover expenses. Jun looked visibly uncomfortable with the bold request, but she eventually gave in. Shortly afterward, the girl came down the stairs beaming, shouting that they were rich while waving a green jade plaque that would serve as their credit card from that point on. Without giving him time to ask questions, she pulled the surprised young man by the arm, excited to start spending. While the group moved around, tension was rising behind the scenes. A subordinate rushed to his lady's palace with news that a new entrance to the tomb of the Immortals had been discovered. Still out of breath, the messenger reported that they had been ambushed by the people of the hidden arena along the way, handing over a package for inspection while bowing respectfully. Out on the streets, the mood was celebratory. Joe showed off his purchases with a wide grin, celebrating a productive day, when the protagonist suddenly remembered that they had forgotten the child back at the Chamber of Commerce. Before they could react, Lucha descended from the sky, landing heavily behind them. The message was short and direct. The tomb entrance was open, and they needed to move now, because a brutal battle was waiting. Excited by the call, the hero accepted the challenge immediately. The doe, caught between fear and excitement, begged not to be left behind and followed the group toward their final destination. Lu focused her energy to seal the spell, while the group positioned themselves in front of the gigantic crimson portal. The atmosphere grew heavy when a stranger appeared, spitting insults and surprised to see that even the big shot from Quinyang wanted a share of the tomb of the Immortals. With a look of pure hatred, the man sized up the protagonist and, wrapped in a dark aura with scarlet eyes, demanded blood. Chen's response was instant. He spread his arms, and his magic sword materialized in the air, glowing with the moon ring technique. With a leap that defied gravity, the hero took control of the skies and came crashing down like a meteor onto the attacker. Chen grabbed the fighter by the neck with icy fury, demanding to know who that piece of trash thought he was to bark at them. While enemy reinforcements were wiped out by a surprise attack from the rear, the leader of the hidden arena trembled in Chen's grip. The protagonist tightened his hold, demanding the organization's plans, but the man chose silence, delivering only a final threat about the city's fate before his eyes burst into a terminal red glow. The group stared at the lifeless body for a moment and then moved toward the cave's entrance. Inside, a colossal statue surrounded by spirals of magic blocked their path. Chen froze, feeling a chill run down his spine. The monument was his own reflection. The instant he noticed the resemblance, the statue's eyes fired blinding rays of light, and a secret passage bathed in blue light swung wide open. As they crossed the portal, the scenery shifted into absolute emptiness. In the middle of the darkness, the silhouette of a mysterious girl in long robes appeared. When she opened her black eyes, whirlwinds of energy began lashing around her. Without saying a word, she shot toward Chen like a shadow, leaving nothing but a trail of light behind. The hero locked his gaze, ready for whatever came next. The world around her began to shatter, turning into dust before her eyes. Terrified, she saw her own reflection floating in the void before the scene abruptly changed. Suddenly, Chen and the others were back in a normal classroom, sitting at their desks. At the board, a red-haired teacher explained the lesson, pointing to the notes. The hero jumped to his feet in confusion, just as a blue-haired girl walked into the room with a young man, happily calling him her brother. The girl ran to Chen's desk and excitedly invited him to his grandfather's birthday party. Not understanding anything and overwhelmed with fear, the protagonist simply said he was leaving, and in the blink of an eye, the setting changed again. He appeared in a familiar bedroom where his grandfather, alive and smiling, was waiting for him in an armchair. Tears flooded Chen's face. The happiness of seeing the old man again was overwhelming. Meanwhile, the immortal watched everything from the outside, realizing that this was Tai's purification test. A mysterious voice explained that the trial threw the heart into 1,000 worlds, creating a perfect reality where everything happened exactly as the person desired. The danger was obsession. If someone as powerful as Chen gave in to his own desires, the 9 islands would be doomed to disaster. The stranger delivered her judgment coldly. If the boy failed the test and surrendered to the illusion, she would kill him on the spot. Inside the dream, the grandfather asked how things were going, and Chen, sitting at the table with his entire family, assured him that everything was fine. He wanted to believe it was real, that his grandfather had never passed away. Meanwhile, in another vision within the magic circle, an imposing lady watched everything from her throne surrounded by red candles. At a lively banquet, the atmosphere was full of celebration and drinking. The host asked about his daughter-in-law, and a young friend holding a glass pointed toward a woman approaching. The man froze in shock when he saw his wife walking toward him. In the middle of the confusion, the child ran away from the table, leaving the man alone to be greeted by an embrace from Lucha. Panic took hold of the man, who tried to buy time by asking for a serious conversation with his wife. At the same moment, a mysterious figure manipulated a circular artifact, projecting images of the inner courtyard of Yunui Palace. Suddenly transported there without understanding how, the young doe trembled with fear until she was approached by a woman with a shocking announcement. That day would mark her transformation into a saint. The tension grew heavy when someone questioned the girl's appearance, but Dan, with a cynical smile, brushed it off, saying it was just exhaustion. With no time to waste, the group set off for the meeting that had already been arranged. Elsewhere, tension exploded inside a restaurant. Vandals surrounded a young girl who screamed desperately as she was dragged outside. The waiter, frozen with fear, begged everyone not to get involved. Chen stood in the middle of the chaos, torn between his instinct to help and the pressure of the moment. At the peak of the turmoil, his grandfather called him on the phone, inviting him to dinner. The choice was made. Apologizing to the old man, Chen decided to step in. He kicked the door open with full force, demanding that they release the girl, but reality itself shattered. The scene cracked like glass, and Chen was pulled into a divine dimension. There, Master Tai was waiting for him. He praised the young man's courage and, without hesitation, handed him a golden vortex, the immortal veins. Tai launched the artifact straight into Chen's chest, explaining that this power would give him all the answers he sought. Before disappearing, the master left one final warning: always follow your heart. inside a colossal statue. Chen's image glowed with divine intensity, confirming that the master had finally found a successor worthy of the legacy. The ritual began. The immortal veins finally fused with Chen's body, and he sank into deep meditation. The entire place was swallowed by a blinding flash of light. Suddenly, bursts of golden light struck the lady and the doe directly. When Chen opened his eyes, they burned with gold. He could feel the power rebuilding every fiber of his being. He stared at his own hands, which radiated a powerful glow, and smiled as he realized the process had succeeded. Meanwhile, a torrent of pure blue energy surged into Lu's body. She accepted the power with her eyes closed and gave thanks for her own ascension. Under Chen's watchful gaze, surrounded by cyclones of energy, the immortal began to float upward toward the cosmos. In the middle of the chaos, a system alert suddenly appeared in front of the protagonist. Update completed. That was when he came face to face with Joaquin, who appeared out of nowhere. Chen, confused, demanded to know what she was doing there, but the girl fired back immediately, asking where he had gotten himself into. The tension thickened when the immortal stepped in with authority, questioning the girl's intentions. The women eventually moved closer, and the tension began to melt away. Qing confessed that when the time came to protect Tai, she hadn't thought about the consequences or where she might end up. She only wanted to do her part to save the world. The immortal, however, responded bluntly and coldly, warning that the time for hiding behind secrets was over. Chen remained behind, watching everything in shock as the conversation between them came to an end. Without another word, the woman who carried the magical symbol turned toward the protagonist to deliver the final verdict. The revelation finally came out. Those two had thrown hands with each other in the past. Qin, clearly irritated, scolded the immortal while he began the process of returning to the host body to stabilize Chen's new veins. In a flash of light, the girl's radiant essence dove straight into the protagonist's chest. Immediately, the system started firing off completion notifications across the floating screen. Chen closed his eyes and felt his consciousness expand. He could now see every detail of his new power. At the center of his mind, a blinding glow revealed Kin Nato, and right behind it stood a majestic golden palace. At the top of that structure resided the very origin of the system that had chosen him. Qin meditated there, surrounded by a golden aura, but the system rejected her with cold disdain, warning that the truth would be revealed soon. The restoration of the immortal veins reached its peak. In the middle of that massive surge of energy, Chen accessed the ancient history of the Nine Islands world. He witnessed the chaos, invading gods trying to tear reality apart, while the girl unleashed waves of fire against her rival. Time and space twisted violently. The sky itself was sealed by the Bell of Chaos and the Ling Fu seal, trapping the evil deities inside a rift with no escape. The realization hit Chen hard. He was the reincarnation of Tai. The two of them were one and the same. The final vision was brutal, the girl being defeated and falling straight into the abyss. Back in the dark reality of the parallel dimension, Chen found his girlfriend standing beside him. Joe got straight to the point, asking if he had accessed the memories stored within the veins. He confirmed that he had seen pieces of the puzzle and was beginning to understand the bigger picture. That was when the mysterious figure finally decided to speak up and reveal the rest. Now that Chen possessed the immortal veins, the path was open for a new pact. The woman revealed that he was the reflection of Yin, and that she would be the key to completing his awakening mission. Without hesitation, he accepted the agreement. She handed her magical artifact over to him, but the moment of peace didn't last long. A violent rumble shook everything. Stones began crashing down from the ceiling, and panic spread instantly. Someone shouted in the middle of the chaos. The tomb of the Immortals was collapsing. The Guardian wasted no time. She stretched out her hand and ordered everyone to follow her if they wanted to survive. The girl grabbed Chen's arm, promising to pull him out of that world of illusions. He simply closed his eyes and trusted her. A massive vortex of energy swallowed the group. In the blink of an eye, the scene shifted completely. They were back in the real world, standing in the middle of a forest. Liucha, visibly impressed, admitted that Mrs. Jing's illusions were so perfect that it was impossible to tell them apart from reality. The doe, still trying to process everything, sighed out loud, wishing that dream had been real. The guard went straight to the point. None of them had become slaves to the lies of their own minds, and that was what made them special. He explained that those visions were only reflections of the truth, and that the group needed to march to Quinyang immediately. Back in the city, the atmosphere was filled with relief. Shostada rested comfortably and celebrated the fact that Lan hadn't shown up to cause trouble, feeling safe under Sister Jin's protection. The caretaker settled into a corner to meditate, But the silence didn't last long. When she opened her eyes, she found the immortal sitting on her bed. Before she could even process what was happening, Chen pulled a mirror from his robe and delivered the news. It was time for her to return to her true world. With messy hair and eyes locked into the void, the young man pressed the mirror tightly against his chest, silently begging for the return to his world to be real. The shock was so intense that he barely noticed when he found himself standing on the bed, trapped in a deep trance. When he finally reached for the phone vibrating on the couch, his anxiety spiked. There were 5 missed calls, all dated April 19th. He frowned, surprised to realize that time had passed differently than he had imagined. He shrugged and tossed the phone aside, ignoring the calls. They were probably just telemarketers or scams, nothing worth his attention right now. That was when a noise from the wall made him spin around. A girl appeared in the doorway, holding a bottle and casually praising the taste of something she had just tried. Stunned, he called her by name, demanding to know how she had been transported there. The explanation came quickly. Although her physical body remained in another plane, she could now follow him as a spirit, directly bound to his presence. To prove the connection, she stretched out her hand, and the tip of her finger glowed with pure golden energy, revealing knowledge that went far beyond human logic. Meanwhile, the outside world was in chaos. The TV displayed footage of firefighters battling massive flames in a large-scale fire that had forced the evacuation of an entire neighborhood. The news report detailed the tragedy at Changfeng Municipal Hospital on April 18th, followed by a tense press conference from the hospital director on April 19th. Chen watched everything in silence, connecting the dots about the strange series of fires that had been hitting the city over the past few days. The heavy atmosphere was suddenly broken by persistent knocking at the door. He rushed to answer it and came face to face with a little girl, who greeted him with a polite smile. The girl introduced herself as Boyolink and, without wasting time, asked whether he remembered the auction that had taken place 2 days earlier. That was all it took. Chen instantly pictured the masked figure with feathers who had stood out at the event and confirmed that he knew exactly who she was. While Boyolink explained how she had managed to track him down after the anonymous auction, the mood in the room grew tense. Ling, now in her spiritual form, watched the visitor with curiosity, and the two exchanged short, cautious greetings. Boyolink then revealed the critical truth. The man wearing the wolf mask at the auction was Luan, her older brother, and his situation was dire. The report was intense. During an exorcism ritual that went terribly wrong, Luan had been struck by anomalous flames and was now hovering between life and death. His family was desperate and willing to pay any fortune for one of the miraculous pills Chen had displayed at the event. Chen's confusion was genuine. He questioned whether demons and exorcisms were truly part of that world, leaving Boyolink stunned. To her, it was unthinkable that the creator of such powerful medicine could be ignorant of the supernatural reality. Chen rubbed his temples and admitted that his only real talent was alchemy. He knew nothing about spiritual warfare. Boyolink then gave him a quick lesson. The world was infested with demons born from the accumulation of malignant energy, and powerful clans had dedicated their lives to hunting them down. She and her brother belonged to the Zhuanyuan Shi clan, a noble lineage that carried the name of the legendary Yellow Emperor, the very father of Taoism. As he listened, Chen mentally connected the dots. It made sense. Those demons were likely the result of energy leaking from the evil gods trapped inside the dimensional rift he had seen in his memories. Unwilling to profit from someone else's tragedy, he simply extended his hand and gave the pill to the girl. He refused the money, asking only that she save her brother. In return, he received a deep, heartfelt expression of gratitude and relief. The mood shifted instantly. Chongling, believing Chen's behavior was too unpredictable and overly kind, decided to step in. She blocked the delivery of the pill and ordered the visitor to wait, explaining that things weren't that simple. Since Chen was her master for having rescued her, she demanded that Boyolink do the same. If she wanted the medicine, she would have to swear loyalty and acknowledge his authority. Shocked by the demand, Chen grabbed Chongling's hand and told her to stop immediately. But the legendary link seal remained a complete mystery. Changsun made it clear. The upcoming auction was the only real chance to find what was still missing. Right at the entrance, a young attendant appeared to formally welcome them, greeting the group on behalf of the Yuanxing Chamber of Commerce. He found Jai standing there, frozen the moment she looked inside the apartment. Her eyes nearly popped out when she saw the other two girls. To make matters worse, Chen, trying to fix the confusion caused by Chongling's orders, ended up stumbling over his own explanation about who was in charge of whom. That only made Jai more suspicious and confused about where those girls had come from. Chen forced an awkward smile and asked her to ignore the situation and come in. On the spot, he improvised, claiming they were just business contacts from the auction and that they were handling work matters. Jai didn't buy it completely. She complained that she had called him several times and he hadn't answered, forcing her to come in person. Holding his head, Chen apologized again, blaming his alchemy work for making him lose track of time. Deep down, he felt like an idiot when he realized he had completely forgotten to save Jai's phone number. The chaos inside the apartment reached its peak. Chen tried to justify himself by saying he had ignored the calls because he thought they were scams, but that only made things worse. One of the girls, acting with unsettling casualness, commented that the bedroom's feng shui was a mess, and casually confessed that she couldn't resist using the bathroom. She had already taken a shower there. To top it all off, she even offered to help Chen wash himself, proudly boasting about her delicate hands. Chen nearly lost his mind. He rushed toward Jai, desperately trying to explain that everything was a huge misunderstanding and that he had never expected such comments. In the middle of the verbal crossfire, Boiling said her goodbyes. She needed to take the pill to the hospital to save her brother, but made it clear that once he recovered, she would return to fulfill her promise of servitude. Chen begged her to forget that idea of becoming his servant, insisting it had all been a terrible joke from Sean Link. But Boiling was determined. To her, the pill was undeniable proof that Chen was a powerful and influential master, possibly the heir to a prestigious lineage. Jai, who had been witnessing everything, girls coming out of the shower, promises of servitude, and deadly challenges, simply couldn't handle the mental overload anymore. She grabbed her head and fainted before she could say a single word. The entire group panicked and rushed to her side, trying to wake her up. When she finally opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was the girl with the mark on her forehead leaning right over her. The shock was the final blow. Realizing she was staring at what looked like a ghost, Jai screamed, and the girl screamed right back. Jai's face turned completely red with pure terror. Chen finally snapped and ordered the girls to stop terrifying the visitor. Songling, slightly offended, demanded to know if she was really that ugly, but Boiling didn't sugarcoat it. She bluntly confirmed that she was indeed scary. In the middle of the mess, Chen helped Jai stand up, trying to calm her down. Cornered by her questions about who those figures really were, he decided to be honest, without revealing everything. He explained that they weren't human, but they weren't ghosts either. They were benevolent beings he simply couldn't explain yet. Trying to lighten the mood, Songling formally introduced herself and still managed to throw in a jab at Juasing, calling her a monster. Jin, attempting to play peacemaker, offered Jai a glass of water, and the two ended up exchanging small smiles, sealing a temporary truce. Chen then changed the subject, curious about the real reason for the visit. Jai explained that since she couldn't reach him by phone, she had come personally to deliver a letter sent by her father. Chen was surprised. He hadn't expected correspondence from such an important man. Jai assured him that the envelope was sealed and that the order was to deliver it as quickly as possible. When Chen picked up the envelope, he noticed the auction seal and immediately started thinking. He suspected it was a VIP invitation to the next event, where new spiritual treasures would be showcased. While he carefully examined the paper, Songling stepped closer to Jai, complimenting her smooth skin and asking what her real relationship with their master was. Jai, slightly embarrassed, explained that Chen was her savior. That answer made Songling flash a mischievous smile, the kind that clearly said she thought she had figured everything out. The moment was suddenly interrupted by Boiling's shout. They had finally reached their destination. Tired of being the target of jokes, the girl snapped and demanded respect, but the group simply told her to calm down. Ja, always suspicious, immediately realized the kids had their eyes on other valuable relics. Meanwhile, the protagonist tried to understand how the spiritual connection between him and Hang actually worked. The explanation was straightforward. Once she accepted him as her master, a mental bond had been forged, allowing Hang to sense his intentions. The problem was that tracking treasures in that world was a bureaucratic nightmare due to the rigid laws of nature. So far, his radar had only detected the 5 elements disc. He could feel the item was nearby, but the misunderstanding had already taken root. Right in the middle of the chaos, more knocking echoed at the door. A female voice called out for Chen. He quickly apologized to his guests and went to answer. When he opened the door, the boy guided them inside and introduced the person in charge. Chen Jin, the president of the chamber, was already waiting for Chung Song. The protagonist quickly connected the dots. The woman running the auction was the very leader of the organization. But this meeting wasn't social. Chen Jin went straight to business. She revealed that the professor wasn't there just to watch. There was a business proposal on the table, and she would act as the mediator. Curious, Xing asked who was behind the offer. Sensing a hidden presence, the protagonist wasted no time and called out whoever was standing behind the wall, questioning the point of hiding. Chen Jin was stunned. She hadn't expected the master's companion to be so perceptive, proving she was far from an ordinary girl. With a low laugh, a man named Liu stepped through the doorway. He introduced himself as a member of the prestigious Xuanyuan clan and revealed that he had come to seal a deal. Once everyone was seated in the hall, Liu Yi began with polite praise, acknowledging that despite his young age, the boy had already mastered advanced techniques. The atmosphere shifted into direct negotiation mode. The protagonist brushed aside formalities and told him to get straight to the point. Liu admitted that the pill offered at the auction had an extraordinary level of quality. The real purpose of the invitation was to identify the master alchemist behind that creation. When the young man calmly stated that he himself was the creator, the warrior burst into laughter filled with disbelief. To Liu, it was impossible that a mere boy could be the genius responsible for such a masterpiece. He felt like he was being made a fool. Song Ling immediately stepped in, reminding him that age doesn't define talent and that young people can absolutely be exceptional. Liu's tone shifted into something more thoughtful. Realizing he might have underestimated the boy, he changed tactics and made an official offer. He wanted the protagonist to join the Xuanyuan clan, promising access to rare treasures and resources. But the response hit like a bucket of cold water. The hero refused without hesitation, claiming he was far too lazy to tie himself to any organization. Liu simply laughed at his confidence, secretly impressed by the boy's boldness in believing he didn't need anyone's protection. The tension escalated instantly. The protagonist didn't back down and spoke bluntly. First, the man doubted his word, then tried to intimidate him, and now acted like they were friends. In his view, there was no foundation for polite conversation between people who clearly didn't get along. Chen Jin attempted to step in, suggesting the meeting should end since there would be no agreement with the Xuanyuan clan. But Liu, visibly offended, reminded everyone that he belonged to one of the three great powers of the world and had personally taken the time to come there. He demanded respect. The boy's reply was pure mockery. He said the politics of the great clans meant nothing to him and compared their importance to slaughtering pigs. The old man nearly exploded with rage at the offensive comparison. But before the argument could escalate further, the hero suddenly interrupted everyone just to check a message on his phone, completely ignoring the authority in the room. While the protagonist calmly read the message, Liu burned with anger over the blatant disrespect, already determined to teach the brat a lesson in manners. The tension in the room became so intense that the water in the glasses began to ripple and spill over. Seeing the situation about to spiral out of control, Chen Jin firmly put her foot down. She reminded the old man that he was standing on guild territory and that threats would not be tolerated there. Enraged, Liu demanded to know who she thought she was to challenge him, claiming that not even her grandfather could stop him from defending his honor. Then he delivered an ultimatum. He wanted the name of the master alchemist immediately. If the boy behaved and cooperated, he would walk away unharmed. Otherwise, there would be no salvation. With an ironic smile, the protagonist casually advised the warrior not to push himself too hard at his age, while Song Ling added fuel to the fire by teasing him, asking whether the old man thought a little too highly of himself. Cornered by mockery and defiance, Liu's face turned red with rage, ready to make his next move.